Fight Plus is the ultimate digital platform for live sports and entertainment, and they're now offering a free 7-day trial at tryfight.com. Fight Plus is packed with a premium live event schedule, over 1,000 hours of live action every year, and a library of more than 4,000 hours on demand, plus exclusive content you can't get anywhere else. Fight is a great partner of ours. They support us, so let's support them. Give that free 7-day trial a shot, and you'll be a member for life. That's tryfight.com. tryfite.com.
The recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer himself, the greatest professional wrestler to ever lace up the boots. Ladies and gentlemen, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, you're just coming right out of the gate, talking smack, lying, BSing,
No.
doing what you do. No. Conrad, how we doing today, pal?
Man, better than I was this time last week, because now tickets are on sale for AEW in Huntsville.
Oh,
I can't believe you guys are coming here to my own backyard, but as I understand it, not one but two House Rules events went on sale last weekend. Tupelo, Mississippi, Huntsville, Alabama. Here we come. This should be fun, man.
Conrad, I literally, and folks, we record these on Monday morning, usually, but we're recording this on Monday morning. So my week gets cranked up early when I kind of looked at I guess you could say, starting the month now, Huntsville, I know we got House Rules. We got Corbin and Salem and Huntsville and Tupelo, but kind of taking a step back from that, Connie, Forbidden Door all across Canada, Wembley. I don't know if you caught some of that news this weekend, how it was being the banners in Wembley, a stadium in the terrestrial television, free to air, as we call them soccer games. They call them football games. So from Huntsville to Wembley and all points in between. But Connie, are you going to have some of your faithful show up at Von Braun Civic Center? Wait,
Yeah.
is it still called? What do you locals still call the arena there?
Well, everybody calls it VBC, but it's actually called Probst Arena.
That's what I'm saying. So yes.
Yeah. One of our hometown boys done good, made a whole bunch of cash, donated a bunch of cash, Mr. Bill Probst. And we're up and running. We're going to have fun. Tickets are on sale now. AEWTIX.com. That's AEWTIX.com. Our man Darby Allin's on the poster. John Moxley's on the poster. Orange Cassidy's on the poster. Claudio Castagnoli's on the poster. Will Hobbs. Of course, DMD, Miss Britt Baker's on there. And who else is strutting right through the middle? Good old Double J, and he's going to be strutting to the pay window tomorrow night, because boy, as if Dax's tough week hasn't been enough. Last week, he sunset his podcast. This week, he gets his ass kicked by the Last Outlaw. Back-to-back bad weeks. Let this be a lesson to you. Don't let Matt Coon cross your path. It's like a black cat of the wrestling business. I mean, the podcast last week, but are you just going to win the tag titles in a singles match? I mean, I think if anybody could do that, you could do it.
Conrad, I always like to say this about you. You would never, ever, ever hit a man when he's down.
No, not me.
You just kick him.
You don't even have to bend down. Now, listen, I think you know that I am a huge FTR fan.
Oh, now we're going to get out the honey.
No. I love FTR. They're my favorite tag team, for real. I love watching their stuff. However, this ain't a tag team match. It's a singles match.
Now we're talking.
And I'm just being honest. He's not going to be able to give the hot tag to anybody. He's just going to have to lay there and count the lights. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Now we're talking, pal. Now we're talking.
I'm just saying, let me ask you, you consider yourself a half-assed wrestling historian. You flip through the channels, you flip through the record books as they turn those pages of history. Has Dax Harwood been the WCW World Champion?
Nope.
Has Dax Harwood been the NWA World Heavyweight Champion?
Nope.
Has he been the Intercontinental Champion more times than he's got fingers?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm just saying. Next verse, same as the first. Dax Harwood's counting the lights. Last Outlaw. What would it take you? 5 minutes? 6 minutes?
That's my partner. That's just talking right from the gut. Maybe Coon will roll his ass down there and maybe second him, and the next thing you know, Podfather will show up.
No, I'll let Sottenham handle my light work. My man Sottenham's got something for Mr. Matt Coon. No, I'm looking forward to tomorrow night. Yeah. If you haven't made plans to set your DVR, if you're out and about gallivanting on a Wednesday night, first of all, get with the Lord and get your life right. Get home and watch Dynamite, because Dax Harwood is going to lose a singles match live in front of all of his friends and family. Double J he does no jobs for nobody. I mean, I don't know if y'all have seen the record, but he's more likely to hold up Tony Khan and leave with a duffel bag full of cash than he is to lose tomorrow night.
Oh, Conrad, I knew you'd crank this thing. All kidding aside, Dax is I saw him at WrestleCade have a single. He's very, very skilled.
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, just not skilled enough, you know.
Okay.
That's okay.
You got the hammer down this morning. You're not even backing down to fourth gear. Third's not even in the question.
Listen, let me just be honest. If this was a tag affair, and I'd just like to remind the world about who put together Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett for the first time. I don't recall, but we should probably look it up. But I would say this. If this was a tag match, and I consider you one of my very best friends, I'd have to say FTR. I mean, because they've been working as a cohesive unit for over a decade, they can probably get their hand raised on that. But come on now. As far as a singles wrestler, buddy, you forgot more about wrestling than Dax knows as a singles wrestler.
Last Outlaw needs a win. And when I get dialed in, Connie, I'm going to get dialed in, laser focused. All kidding aside, I am really, really looking forward to this. Got up this morning thinking about the match. How about that? Got the podcast, got some baseball duties late today. Yeah, I got some, obviously some AEW, we'll call it day job duties. Lots, as we say, lots of moving parts in my world, but I woke up thinking about this match, a singles match. I'm pumped. I'll just say that. I am super excited. We've talked about the year of 2022 and some surprises. And yes, Connie, hats off to you. You did put me and Jay Lethal together. I'm glad you slid that in there. But it's 2023. We've had some highs and we've had some lows. Aubrey Edwards is probably at the very top of that list.
Oh, wait. Is she the ref tomorrow?
I damn sure hope not.
I'll tell you this. If she is, I'm getting Jack Tunney on the phone. We're going to make some damn changes around here.
You need to call Stanley Blackburn as well.
It's time for a change. You know what? Sam Levitas and I agree. Hey,
oh yeah. Now we're talking.
When was the last time you gave somebody a guitar necklace? Because I think Dax is such a historian for wrestling. He'd love to go home with a lovely souvenir, a guitar around his neck. Yeah.
FedEx shipped directly to his house after it's cracked.
Well, what I was going to say is maybe this is the ultimate move to me. After you crown his ass with a guitar, after you beat him clean, no interference, no cheating necessary, not necessary. Stroke 1, 2, 3. Send him home with a lovely parting gift. Crack that guitar over his head, and then yell out to Sanjay to replace that pencil with a Sharpie. Go ahead and autograph that guitar for him. Send him home with a lovely parting gift for his daughter.
From South Beach. We're in Sunrise, Florida. We'll sunset him in Sunrise.
I love it. There you go. Be sure to tune in tomorrow night and watch maybe the most lopsided ass whooping on TV this year. I mean, back in 1988, they might even call it a squash match. But that's what you can expect tomorrow night as Dax is doing enhancement duty for our old pal Double J. Don't forget, snag all these tickets, man. You guys are on tour. You're going to a lot of fun places. AEW TIX is where you can get them. I actually saw where they've actually got a couple of reserved ringside seats that are platinum level, which means if you're still looking for great seats, you can still get them. They do put a premium on there. I just want to give a shout out. I know a lot of our listeners assume that the only thing of relevancy or the only thing of note happens at a television taping.
Mm-mm.
I could understand why you would believe that if you've never actually been to a live event. but I've been to pay-per-views and I've been to TV tapings and I've been to quote unquote non-televised live events. I have more fun consistently, not every now and again, every single time at a non-televised live event. Here's the reality. When you're at a pay-per-view, you are not, if you're a paying customer in the seats, in the stands, you are not the priority the television viewer at home is. And that is even more true on a television show because they're going to be taking television breaks. And so you're going to see a TV show happen in front of you, but that means a lot of sitting and waiting and patience and backstage stuff. At a live event, that show is for you. So if you're on the fence about whether or not to go and well, nothing of consequence will happen, how consequential is this? It's going to be the most fun you've had at a wrestling show. You have more fun at a live event 10 times out of 10 than you do at a TV show. Try it one time. And if I'm wrong, don't go again. But I promise you, once you see wrestling live with no television cameras present, you'll want to be there as often as you can. AEW TIX is where you can pick up the tickets. The show is for you. You're not an afterthought. You're the primary thought. You're going to have a blast. AEWTIX.com.
Could not have said that any better. Just the simple priority. Folks, that's a teaching moment from the guy who's a mortgage who says, oh, I don't know. He plays humble pie, but well said, partner. Well said.
Listen, I'm excited to be chatting with you today. We're going back into the archives, talking about TNA, the early days of TNA, 2003. And we're going to be covering a lot of shows that I want you to go relive with us. It's impactwrestling.com/packages. Use our promo code Jeff. There's some really great stuff on here. I still think that the Impact subscription model is one of the best values in all of wrestling today. That's impactwrestling.com/packages. Use that promo code Jeff. And let's just pick up where we left off, I guess. Your first show in April is on the 2nd. And it's pretty much all based around you and SEX. SEX, of course, being the big faction here. They're trying to get D'Lo Brown to join. Brian Lawler is going to be in singles action here, beating Wildcat Chris Harris. And after the match, Lawler and David Flair are going to double team Harris before Dusty Rhodes comes out. And man, it's bionic elbows for everyone around. He's going to cut a promo about the NWA title and have TNA are building up the prestige and value of the titles. And then shit on Flair for stealing his daddy's belt. And it ends with Lawler challenging Dusty Rhodes to a ladder match. Listen, a lot of people have given the WWE over the years shit for making Dusty wear polka dots. But here you are in 2003 booking my man in a ladder match. I'm throwing the party foul on that one.
Come on. Now, see, look, as we dive into this episode, it is very, very hard for me to swallow the fact, Conrad, we're talking about content created 20 years ago.
Where's the time go?
I'm literally, it boggled my mind because there's some stuff in here that I don't recall, but a lot of it, I'm like, God almighty, that was 20 years ago. Oh, the American dream. And as I don't want to give the payoff to why we did this, but the fact that 20 years later, you reference polka dots and, was that a rib? Let me ask you, because you've done many an hour with our man, Mr. Bruce Pritchard. Does Bruce say the polka dots was a rib?
No, he says nothing back then was ever a rib.
Yeah.
He won't even acknowledge that Virgil being named Virgil was a rib. Clearly it was. And by the way, Akeem, the African dream, and have him doing all those silly dances like Dusty did. Come on, instead of the American, it was all a rib on Dusty. You and I haven't talked about that. Do you think there's any?
I never thought about Akeem being a Dusty rib.
Instead of the American dream, the African dream, and he's doing all the white guy doing all this. Come on.
I'm not kidding you. I thought one man gang. It's like, I just get into this. Bushwhackers. I saw something online that was a rib. I vividly remember because they were the sheep herders to me, and
yes.
Bad ass son of a guns. I mean, the sheep herders versus the Fabs was some of my. I mean, I died to go to spot shows when that program was red hot because the spot shows would be just crammed to the rafters, people everywhere, and they would there was no 3-star, 4-star. They just brawled and kicked the hell out of each other, and it was just all that. But the sheep herders going to the bushwhackers, is that a rib? Akeem, Conrad, it's the first time I've ever. We ought to do a whole podcast, ribs in wrestling, fact or fiction.
I don't think it's debatable. Virgil, all right, so everyone's always heard over the years that the $1 Million Man is the character that Vince would give himself, right? This is the character that if Vince was going to be a gimmick, that's what he would do. I understand that. And then his chief competitor at the time is Jim Crockett Promotions, and the guy running the show over there, or one of the top guys in the booker, if you will, is a guy named Virgil Runnels, who once upon a time Vince might have even went with. Like Bruce has even said that had Hulk Hogan not existed, Vince would have went with Dusty. And it's crazy to think about Dusty on that first WrestleMania poster sitting next to Mr. T, what that could have looked like. Like it was a whole new thing. Of course, it didn't happen. So anyway, he names his chief rival. I mean, he has a manservant, and he names him. Can you imagine, like, if all of a sudden there was a manservant character on WWE programming and they called him Tony Khan?
Conrad, my head has gotten so far down. Akeem was a manservant.
No, Virgil was to the $1 Million Man. That's
what I mean. Yeah. But I'm going on. You dancing is a vision in my brain that that was.
Yeah, come on. I mean, he's my dad, right? Like,
Akeem, the African dream. Yeah. I love Slick.
I got the figures over here where fans have sent like custom Akeems in Alabama colors. So anyway, the point is, it was all the rib. I don't think the polka dots were a rib. I mean,
I don't either. I never looked at that as a rib. I thought that was a character development.
It is character. We need some. I think a lot of people forget that you couldn't just be black boots, black trunks back then. WWE wasn't about that. They had dudes out here with birds and snakes, and bulldogs and dragons. Yeah. I mean, hell, they made one guy ride a horse to the ring with a light up cowboy hat. That poor son.
Can you imagine that?
Who'd do that shit? And that's the thing that always tickled me. It's like, so polka dots were a rib. Jeff walking on a horse on concrete being lit up like he was a bad guy, heel villain in the movie Running Man. That's not a rib. That's fine. And we'll dress this other motherfucker up like a clown. Also not a rib. But boy, we draw the line at these polka dots. Like, what? I mean, Jeff was out there in Venetian blinds underneath a light up cowboy hat on an actual horse. And by the way, folks,
in the dark,
Jeff's fancy. I don't know that I think a lot of people think you live on like a farm. They think you and I both live on a farm and we've got barbed wire fences because we live in the South. I don't think they understand. Jeff lives in a gated community. The only way to get there is by seaplane or boat. There's a whole moat around it. There's armed guards at the gate.
Oh, stop.
Like, there's no horses. There's no barns. There's no stables. Jeff ain't a half-ass cowboy at all. I mean, all of his neighbors drive Bentleys and Rolls Royces, and he tries to come on, just tell the truth.
Yeah, but riding a horse on concrete in the dark with power, you talk about making a horse, it's like a recipe, the risk of that. Anyway.
The least dangerous thing you would do that night would be wrestle. That'd be the least dangerous thing you would
do. We're going to walk a horse down a ramp. So you had to get that horse up there. It's just bizarre.
On concrete with pyro. Yes. By the way, how many of I know a lot of you might not be familiar with this. You reckon your dogs really get excited about 4th of July? Probably not. Yes. Now we got a horse, an animal that could just run over anything and destroy everything in this whole zip code. And Jeff's on it with metal shoes on concrete at night. And by the way, it's not as if this was foolproofing on this rig you used to wear that lit up. If I had to guess, a wire or two occasionally touched that skin, and that probably didn't feel that good.
It was the what do you call that? Prototype.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
So the idea that you took your electric bomb jacket off and dismounted the horse, that's when you knew we're home free.
You ain't kidding. Thank God I made it through the entrance. That's the truth.
Boy, Dusty had to wear polka dots. What a rib. Come on, man. Are you kidding?
Oh, that was fun. But Dusty Rhodes in a ladder match, my circling all the way back to that, just the fact that we're drawing this analogy like, oh, you're ribbing Dusty, you're doing this. Not at all. The intrigue of Brian Lawler or Brian Christopher versus Dusty Rhodes in a ladder match has the viewer going, well, I've seen Dusty throw his bionic elbow and beat up all four horsemen at the same time. I don't think I've ever seen him scale a ladder, but you know what? It's going to be entertaining. And his promo to get into it is highly entertaining. That's part of Dusty, because this was a collaboration with Dusty, and the payoff we'll get to in a minute. But it was obviously thought through. But how are we going to get there? And Lawler, God rest his soul, Brian was a bump taking son of a gun, super entertaining, knew exactly how to kind of get this roll over, and it did it well. But yeah, that's how we kicked off April of 2003 at the TNA Weekly Asylum shows.
I just love this era of TNA. The early TNA days were so much fun. And what's great to go back and revisit about this is you can see so many stars before they were real stars, like Alexis Lurie. She's going to come in as a second for Raven. We know her these days as Mickie James. How in the world does she come on your radar? If you're watching over on YouTube, what an early shot of Mickie James there. Man, she could work her ass off, and you probably knew that very early on, didn't you?
Yeah, and I want to say, I don't know if he was the contact, but she came out of the Baltimore area. I think our man, MCW. It was
Dan McDevitt, yep.
Good old Dan. We got some announcements coming up as it relates to Dan, but the I think it was Julio. I don't know, but there was a connection. But the day Mickie came in, she's athletic but fearless. I'll give her that. She might have not have been the most polished worker day one, but nobody is. But man, she was fearless, great attitude, bump taking little lady. But just, I'll say that she was really fearless and had a, like a lot of folks in the early days at the asylum, I think that's the one vibe that no matter where you were at in your career, it was, I'm not going to say we got the ball rolling financially, but we got the momentum going of entertaining 2-hour shows that was infectious. They were fun to do, and we're going to get into the backfighting with Russo and Dixie and my dad and all that kind of nonsense. But the energies in the show and the hype videos that we would play as the countdown, when the 2 hours started, like I said, no matter where you're at, and we're going to talk about Dusty, we're going to talk about D'Lo Brown, obviously Russo and SEX, Sports Entertainment Extreme. It had Mike Sanders and Glenn Gilberti and others, but also Ron and Don Ayers, The Truth, Conan, guys that had made their name elsewhere. But then our upstarts, Chris Harris, James Storm. I mean, we could go on and on and on. But the energy as things kind of took off, the momentum was an absolute. It was a blast to do, and that's kind of what defined this era. Doing the research collectively over the last year and a half, you can just kind of see from a financial perspective. Look, I don't want to say it's way up, way down. He was flat, little take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, that kind of deal until we got the Spike. Or we went monthly pay-per-views. But anyway, when we got the Spike deal, then it really trajectory up. But as far as kind of finding our way with different matches and different storylines, this will be a good episode to kind of define it, because the way we cap this episode off will be a success.
I'll tell you what else is a success is using Sunday on your lawn. Jeff has a beautiful spread there, as we've mentioned, behind all the security guards and the big gates and the moat, right on its own island. I mean, it's not even a peninsula. It's like an island there in Hendersonville on the lake. And if you're like me, man, taking care of your grass on your island, that can be a pretty daunting task. No, serious business, folks. Sunday makes this so easy. I have to admit, I live, in a very mountainous, rocky area. And at times it's been really challenging getting it dialed in so I can have at least some semblance of a yard for the girls and the dogs. Sunday has made it easy. and made it affordable. Prior to using Sunday, I was spending like $1,500 a year on lawn care service. Here's the heads up. Sunday's full season plan start at just $109, and I can even get it cheaper than that. Stay tuned. This is the time of year we're all wanting to spend a little more time outside. The question is, do you want to spend time working in the yard or enjoying the yard? Come on, let's scratch that off our to-do list. Let's get those flowers blooming. Let's spend time enjoying the yard. Let's reclaim the weekend. Sunday can help you do that. Sunday's everything you need to get the lawn you've always dreamed of. Go to getsunday.com/myworld. I want to say that again. Go right now to getsunday.com/myworld. It's crazy what they do. You enter in your address and you'll get a customized plan created just for your lawn. They'll know what area of the country you are, what type of grass you're using, what the soil is like in your area. They even can get it pretty close on the square footage. They've got aerial photos of your house. I don't mean to alarm you. It's amazing. This technology. Go check it out. getsunday.com/myworld. I was blown away. And I thought, well, how can they really know? And when I saw my doggone house, I thought, well, I guess they know. They make it easy, man. No more trips to the store. No more hauling big, heavy bags. They're going to ship you everything you need. Now, when it gets there, all you need to apply is a hose. That's it. You can fertilize your whole lawn in the same time it would take you to watch an episode of your favorite TV show. By the way, Sunday only uses ingredients you can feel good about. What I mean is no harsh chemicals, no long waiting periods. You don't have to try to keep your kids and your pets off the lawn. You just apply it, let it dry, and then bam, back to enjoying your yard. So that makes Sunday both easy and affordable. We mentioned that I was paying over $1,500 a year. Well, Sunday's full season plan, as I said, starts at just $109. But right now, Sunday's offering our listeners 20% off. That's right. Full season plan start at just $109, but you can get 20% off when you visit getsunday.com/myworld at checkout. That's 20% off your custom plan at getsunday.com/myworld. Let's jump back into it here, Jeff. You're trying some new things here. Goldie is going to be interviewing you, and she says some people have been saying you've been acting differently. And you say you didn't want the rumor BS, you want names. And Goldie says, quote unquote, some of the boys told her. And you snap, oh, you've been around a few months and all of a sudden you're going to throw around insider terminology? And she brings up how you said you couldn't be at the show because you had a charity event, but then you showed up and attacked everyone. And you grab her by the throat and say, it's not beneath me to kick your ass if you keep it up. And Wade would say it was a strange segment. I know you're trying to show that you're a heel here, and maybe some of this is hearkening back to when you were on your tear in the WWE. What do you remember about this segment?
This was, you just said I was a heel here. I think it was babyface. It was, I don't ever want to kind of say tweener, but at the end of the day, Conrad, my best recollection, as you've taught me to say, because I get anal about, I don't remember exactly, but my best recollection is art imitating life, life imitating art that, you know, we launched, as we've gone into great detail, June 2002. We are 9 months into this. And, you know, as we roll along, somewhere in this coming up, but I don't want to say the extreme pressure is on, but, you know, Panda is looking for what's next. They knew that this is prior to no agents on board. So me and I, look, Russo and there were others, but, you know, we didn't have a staff of agents or producers. I was wearing many, many hats, and people were aware of that. We were getting into a place from a business perspective of really defining our weekly cost. And, you know, Panda they were patient. They were super patient, but they were very much hands-on. Where's every penny being spent? So not that I thought that was a bad thing, but it was very, very time consuming. So being a talent, being a businessman, and all things in between, and then home life and everything that went with that, a lot of pressure. And so we were probably imitating a little bit of my life going on, that being the champion carries, which is the real deal. It carries a lot of weight. At the end of the day, you can, yes, it's scripted entertainment, but the focal point of every promotion, no matter how you slice and dice it, is who is the champion. That's what is the centerpiece, regardless if you call the belt a proper or not. But a lot of pressure, and that was my role. And that was kind of the part of the story that we were in the middle of. That Jeff's feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders.
I mean, you got to be a heel. You're grabbing a lady by the throat, Jeff.
Oh, here we go, Mr. Self-righteous.
I'm not self-righteous. I'm just saying I don't remember a lot of baby faces doing that.
I know it's a different era. So I'm not even defending the story or rationalizing or justifying the story. The story was Goldie kind of got off her side of the street and was trying to push my buttons. And so I responded inappropriately. But it's not like the wrestling business isn't full of inappropriateness. But so you can call it a heel, but let's just say that the protagonist had several flaws, and one of them was losing his temper.
Well, somebody else who's been known to do that every now and again makes a surprise debut here for TNA. New Jack is going to debut to team with Perry Saturn and Sandman to defeat Daniels and the Harris boys. Man, New Jack in TNA. This is something I wouldn't have had on my bingo card, but I was a huge New Jack fan in ECW. Right after New Jack debuts, Mike Barton, identified by Mike Tenay on commentary as the former Bart Gunn in the WWF debuts, and he attacks Perry Saturn. Man, we're debuting two folks here really in the same segment. How does New Jack and Bart Gunn come to join the company?
You know, maybe Conrad, when we wrap this up, and Marcus, maybe you can help him with a little list of names. But this era of TNA, when you look at that diversity, and New Jack, I always got along good with him. I mean, he's highly entertaining both on and off camera, but he would get a hell of a pop. And this was, again, fun energy. And you go from Dusty Rhodes talking about climbing a ladder to New Jack to, you know, at this time, Bart Gunn or Michael Barton had done that, left the WWF, WWE, and gone and worked a Japan gig. And I think he was in between All Japan and New Japan or something along those lines. But we came out of the box with different surprises. I can't say every week, but very often.
And that's one of the fun things is we would see lots of new folks. You never knew what to expect there. The Torch would also say that as they recap the show, a home video aired of Eric Watts cutting a promo on Jeff Jarrett with Brian Urlacher sitting around on a couch. Another video aired with Watts with Neil McCoy and Ira Dean. And then another video with Watts hanging out with Mark Rippon and Jim McMahon at a bar. Finally, a video airs of Watts with Jim Daly.
John.
Yeah. The Torch would say Jim, which made me laugh.
Oh, God.
As you see there, it's John Daly. This is, what's the thinking here? Hey, look, one of our guys knows some famous people.
So I have often thought, long before we launched My World, the Eric Watts that we got in TNA versus the Eric Watts essentially when he broke in fresh out of University of Louisville on WCW television
10 years prior, basically.
Yes. And really, I can't say completely two different folks, but the confidence that Eric had in TNA was just night and day. And I can relate to this in so many ways. He wasn't working for his father. That's a whole nother spin. He wasn't produced by his father. And there is a difference. Working is one thing, but then when you're directly under the thumb of being produced, there is a different set of landscape. And then also just being 10 years of experience, makes it completely different. And Eric would do celebrity golf tournaments, hang out with guys, travel. He was buddies with all these folks. So he's like, hey, let me kind of capitalize on this. And he had a sense about him when he was the antagonist, the heel, just kind of a quick-witted, smarmy, but there's a tinge of, I kind of like this guy, but man, he's arrogant, but I kind of like him to a point, but man, he's an asshole because he's so full of himself. But yes, as you said, hey, he hangs around a lot of famous people. Let's get him on camera. That there was a design that Eric is hobnobbing with all these different folks, but his promos that he would ask his buddies, hey, stand here with me and we'll have a good time, but I'm going to weave a storyline in, and he would weave the storyline in his promos.
I mean, listen, it is a way to get some star power on your show. Let's talk about the main event. You're going to be working with D'Lo Brown here. He's going to get a title shot. Of course, just like Dax tomorrow night, he winds up looking at the lights. You probably spent more time on D'Lo than you'll need on Dax, though. You needed 9 minutes and 45 seconds to finish him. And then afterwards, Raven's going to square off with you in the ring, and all the SCX members surround the ring, and Alexis actually enters the ring, and you nail her with a chair as the show abruptly ends. Wade would say, good match, although not a show stealer by any means. He gave it 3 stars, but after you start the show trying to choke out the damn backstage interviewer, now you're hitting ladies with chairs, and you're a babyface, right, Jeff?
Damn right, pal. That's how we rolled in the asylum, and a hell of a pop, I'm sure. I wondered too, also when it I don't know if that was Wade or Dave that said the show abruptly ended. Dutch Mantel used to pace backstage and with my father and others, and like, hey, is Jeff getting times? Is Jeff getting times? Is Jeff getting times? Yeah, we're giving him to where. But if we abruptly ended, we had 58 minutes. We had to be off 2 minutes before the top of the hour, and we pushed the envelope a lot of times right up there to the end. I'm wondering if that's why we went off, but also the outshot was the chair shot on Mickie.
Yes.
But again, it was the walls are caving in on the champion, and he's cracking. But how's he going to deal with it? And not only how's he going to deal with it, is it going to cause him to completely lose sight of what's the main thing and lose the title?
It's reported in the Torch that Toby Keith is actually backstage at this show. We've talked about Toby Keith when you were trying to do something else years later, and we know that he was at your first set of tapings here in Huntsville. Did he have an interest in the business of your business here in 03 or no?
I can't. I mean, at this point, Panda was heavily involved and enjoying every minute of it. So I don't know if your question is if he was like financially interested in being a part of it. I can't say that, but he's been a buddy since early 90s. So he's always interested in, he likes wrestling, but also was, I think, really wanted to see how we were doing. I think we've documented and go back in the archives, building or launching those, the first episode, June 19th, 2002, Toby there. He could have easily canceled on us because he was asked to be at the White House singing Angry American. That's when our country was, going to war. Had 9/11 had happened, and we were retaliating and all that. But his song was red hot, and but he had committed to his buddy Jeff and said, "I'll be there." So yes, he's always been interested. He slipped in the back door. He was in town in Nashville for whatever reason, out on tour, and a Wednesday night he stopped by, and those days we had a couple of silver bullets, and he enjoyed the show, and that was that. But he always had an eye in our business.
Let's mention that there's going to be another piece of business that makes the news nationally. Phase 3 is an Atlanta-based company that designed the original TNA logo, and they sent a letter to the producers of Chris Rock's Head of State movie, and they're essentially filing a lawsuit saying that they were not paid for the design work. And apparently they actually sued TNA for this, but now they're demanding that they receive compensation for showing the old logo on the movie. What do you remember about this story?
If I remember correctly, as I said earlier, Jay Hausman, a guy named Lynn Sabal, were the early consultants, pay-per-view reps. When we created our very, very first pay-per-view spots, they contracted a company to create, Don West was in those. But anyway, that logo, and as a part of invoices, we didn't even know, because when the head of state and it got on that, we're like, what the hell is phase 3? What are they chirping for? Well, if you kind of roll back downhill, you see that in the whole craziness of it all, Hausman and Lynn Sabal did not pay this invoice, but we were obviously ultimately responsible for it. And Panda, TNA Entertainment, we like, yeah, we owe you the money. So they chirped to get their money.
Another quote from the Torch here. Some TNA skeptics are curious if the company's recent growth in DirecTV sales has been offset by the money TNA spent to advertise through DirecTV. Others are also attributing some of the increase to TNA being moved to DirecTV's main pay-per-view channel from the obscure channel it had been shown on. Now, some of that might seem like, information from a bygone era. So let me try to break it down. There's all these different pay-per-view channels that used to exist, and most of your WWF stuff would be on, if memory serves, like 123, 124, somewhere like there. But they would also have pay-per-views in like the 600 and all that range. And so if you're just listed amongst all the other movies and Girls Gone Wild and things of that nature, that's one thing. But your more premium events, like a Mike Tyson fight, like a WWE pay-per-view, like SummerSlam or what have you, that would be in that 123, 124 range. So the idea that you guys get moved up probably has a lot to do with this. But do you recall y'all ever paying to be part of the DirecTV advertising promotional package, or is that more of a thing on their side? Because as I understand it, for every dollar you make, they get 50 cents. They're going to promote it themselves, right?
Correct. And I don't know where. Anyway, it's journalist trying to but it doesn't even make sense, especially specifically to the DirecTV account. But you're right. But I can't say gigantic traction. I don't ever want it to be misconstrued, but we were getting traction, and DirecTV had found out and figured out, and a constant give and take of the relationship. The Jay Hausman, all that, they were, every partner began to have much more of a comfort level and see that, okay, these guys are, at this level, if we get a little bit more behind them. And so we got moved in better placement. The big thing that I always attributed it to was, and I'm not a DirecTV, I had it for a period of time. My father had it. There were others, JB, there were other folks that would tell me, and we checked on it, and Bob Ryder had it, is that DirecTV, once we kind of got our sea legs, they started running our episodics. Not our episodics, our ads in heavy rotation, in not just in everything on the pay-per-view channel. You knew that we were coming this Wednesday with a replay, and they had the replays. So it was just kind of an internal DirecTV mindset that, okay, we're going to start promoting these guys on our air.
Let's talk about JB. You mentioned him there, and he makes the torch. Quote, there's said to be a lot of snickering among the production members who used to work in WCW over Jeremy Borash's rise to power. Of course, Jeremy Borash had started with WCW back in the day. They brought him in to do WCW Live and worked on the website, and really did the precursor for podcasts over there with Bob Ryder. Came from a radio background, won some awards, and did really well in Minnesota in the radio biz, but then got quite the raise to come into WCW. And then, like a lot of folks, finds himself looking for hey, what am I going to do now? Where's my new gig going to come from now? So he winds up hooking up with you, and he's really there from day one, as you've heard in the archives here, of the planning of TNA. But I guess now that it's a thing, a lot of the people who he used to work with are taking a look and wondering, how is this young guy in this spot Do you remember hearing any negativity about Jeremy Borash and his meteoric rise behind the scenes?
You know, JB was my riding partner in the summer of No Worries. And when we kicked that off, I still get those tweets and stuff like that. That was the summer before when WCW closed in 2001. And then, you know, that entire summer. And then the WCW contract ran out. And then we launched, you know, the following year. But it would amaze me, and this went on for years, that the different passive aggressive comments, some of them would be out knocks, you know, the kind of the running knock that people, hey man, gosh, Jeff, I just can't deal with, I don't want to say it now, but Jeremy, and then either unorganized or not hitting due dates or this or that and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, now wait a minute, let's talk this through. But I learned through the years that the people would come up to me and start knocking folks within the company. Those were the ones that were working the hardest. Were they batting 1,000 and making every decision right? No. But were they taking initiative, taking action, pulling their weight and others? Absolutely. And I just saw it time and time and time again. And the folks that would come up and complain, things got clearer and clearer that this guy's insecure, he's inadequate, he's insecure, he's unsure of himself, his skill set isn't really what he thinks it should be, so I'm going to tear down this guy to build me up, all that stuff that you hear. But it happened often with JB, but I also know that people would understand and begin to realize and compliment, oh, wow, that was JB. I didn't realize that's what he did. Anyway, so JB, OG in TNA, for sure.
It's amazing that he was ever a polarizing figure. Like, I understand he was young, and maybe there's a knock on that. I know in wrestling, it's like, well, where have you paid your dues and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, man, that dude wore a lot of hats, did he not?
Super, super, super important to the growth. Again, I think there was a core of us that didn't mind wearing multiple hats, and didn't really take no for an answer or come up with an excuse. And that ruffled a lot of feathers from a personality standpoint, that people, because JB's good natured and not abrasive and all that, but it's that thing that they would pull me aside, and I would have rather them either cuss JB out or me out or make a scene, but those passive aggressive BS comments would drive me nuts. But you just kind of learn to take it. Okay, that goes with the territory. That's what happens. But you know, boy, over the last couple of years, I wish I would have had some of the lines that just said, hey man, can you take a look at this? Or what is this? It's a mirror. Look in the mirror and tell me your flaws. Don't tell me others, you know, because it would wear, it's such a, that toxicity is such a wear and tear on the psyche of everyone involved.
Well, that's why we got to cut it out. And speaking of cutting out, we need to cut out all the gimmicks from our shaving routine. My goodness, how much do Jeff and I love Henson shaving. We love bragging about this company, first of all, because it's a family business, just like my business and Jeff's. But in addition to that, this is an aerospace parts manufacturer. These dudes have made parts for the International Space Station and the Mars rover. And now they're bringing that precision engineering to razors. You see, they're using aerospace grade CNC machines to make metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches. That's less than the thickness of a human hair. It's going to mean a secure and stable blade that gives you a vibration-free shave. It gets better. The razor also has built-in channels to evacuate hair and cream, which makes clogging virtually impossible. What I respect most about Henson, though, is these cats wanted to make the best razor, not the best razor business. What this means is there's no plastic on this razor. There's no subscription gimmicks. There's not even proprietary blades. There's no planned obsolescence. This is the last razor you'll ever need. And it works with the standard old school dual edge razor blade like your handsome ass grandfather used, like Jeff and all of his wrestling friends are familiar with, except This is the thinnest one you've ever seen. 0.0013 inches, so it gives you the benefits of old school, tried and true, but also too, you enjoy the benefits of new school tech. Seriously, you've never seen a razor blade quite like this. And once you own a Henson razor, man, you can plan on adjusting that budget quite a bit. You see, it's $3 to $5 to replace the blades. Not $3 to $5 a week, not $3 to $5 a month, not $3 to $5 a quarter, $3 to $5 a year. Henson shaving is not only better than what you've been doing, it's also cheaper. And that's not always the case, y'all. Usually when something's better, it costs more money. Henson has made something better and it's cheaper. It's time to say no to subscriptions. It's time to say yes to a razor that will last you a lifetime. Visit hensonshaving.com/myworld and pick the razor for you. Use the promo code MYWORLD and you'll get 2 years worth of blades for free with your razor. Just be sure to add them to your cart. That's 100 free blades when you head to hensonshaving.com/myworld and use the promo code MYWORLD. hensonshaving.com/myworld and the promo code is MYWORLD. So Jeff, let's get back to the torch. It's written here. Wade writes, Glenn Gilberti.
Conrad, can I give a little testimony on Henson?
Yeah.
Guess who the testimony's really about?
Karen.
Nope.
Codester.
Yeah. My man is growing up and he's used a little electric razor, and Karen's like, hey, son, you kind of missed there and that. And he's like, well, anyway, Karen talked him into it and supervised. So my man Codester broke in, first ever shaving with that Henson. Karen was, folks, I know me and Conrad, it's part of the process, but I'm just telling you, Karen's eyes, she could not believe how easy, how close a shave. I'm putting it over, but my man Codester broke it in, Conrad. You're doing him right.
Hey, go check it out. Serious business. Everybody I've put on this razor absolutely loves it.
Yep.
I have one. My dad has one. I even got my barber using one. Everybody who tries it loves it. They're sold. You will too. hensonshaving.com/myworld. Don't forget 100 free blades when you use the promo code MYWORLD. In the torch, Glenn Gilberti has been telling other wrestlers that he, Vince Russo, Raven, and Mike Sanders are doing the creative work during their drives from Atlanta. Russo takes those ideas to Jeff Jarrett on Monday. The two talk again late Tuesday. And Jerry Jarrett has some veto power. Despite Gilberti's claim, it's well known that Jeff and Jerry Jarrett have the final say on booking matters. Is this how creative worked? I mean, do you think? I mean, clearly Russo is a contributor. Do you think Russo was bouncing ideas off of Raven and Disco and Mike Sanders?
What I shouldn't say marvel, but I chuckled at, must have been a really slow news week for Wade and Dave for this kind of stuff, because I think since the beginning of time, my dad likes to tell the story, or used to like to tell the story about how him riding with Roy Welch in the late 60s, that, that's how he, kind of watched the matches. What are we going to put on TV next week? Dutch would go into great detail. Me, Kevin Nash in the 94, 95 making road trips, and Sean and others, that it's car time. Or immediately after a show, when you have the adrenaline pumping, but you're kind of the emotion of and the freshness of the episode that was just produced. So now we got to write the next one. It happens all the time. I mean, literally all the time. And I mean, it happens today in the WWE. It happens today in AEW. That's just kind of the nature of the business. Let's whether it's in airports, on plane rides, and this was a car ride back to Atlanta from Nashville. It's the nature of the beast. So yes, that was a part of the collaborative creative process.
Hey, so something else that comes up in the torch here, and this is timely considering that he's now the president of the show. I love that. Border City Wrestling Scott D'Amore is scheduled to debut as an agent next week. The company has been more or less without agents since the early days, aside from what the already overworked Jarretts do. Boy, this is going to be the beginning of a long-term relationship. Talk to me about Scott D'Amore here in Border City Wrestling and why he was the right guy to get a look as an agent.
So this has been talked about and, different versions, and not for me and Scott, just different things. But at the end of the day, I was looking for a guy that could wear multiple hats,
Right.
B, there is a mindset. I wanted young, but gosh, it was not, you can't get somebody green, hadn't been in the business 3 or 4 years, but had a business head, a talent relations kind of mindset, but also a producer role that knew the nuts and bolts of the matches, just had a different skill set that wasn't easy to find. But I also wanted someone that felt comfortable in that, hey, Jeff, here is maybe another way to do this, but at the end of the day, whatever you kind of hand the ball off to me, I'm going to go get it done. And Scott had that mentality from the very first time. Had diplomacy, had the nuts and bolts mindset of putting together matches, had a creative thread. But was he perfect at that stuff? No, but he wasn't afraid to go to work at the end of the day. But me and him personally have chuckled about that. And he came to work here. God, I can't believe. So that was April of 2003, and he was with us for quite a while, and then went away, then came back, and just our relationship through the Global Force days, last year at Ric Flair Last Match, and now. They're shaking and moving and celebrated the 20th anniversary of the organization. And now it appears, they're doing even more, and got to see our man, Nick Aldis, return to the company. Anyway, but day one, Scott kind of checked all the boxes of that I was looking for, because I desperately needed help.
I think he's one of the most fascinating people in wrestling, because I don't think a lot of people know his background and his real life circumstance, but also too that he's been around for a long time. I mean, my man was, doing he had matches with DDP way back when DDP was on the comeback trail, when he was working as an enhancement talent, and then later had an opportunity to wrestle with ECW, and then does the Team Canada managerial stuff with you guys, but starts working behind the scenes. And maybe that's where he actually enjoys the majority of his success. And right now, as we're talking, think about this. We just covered that 20 years ago, he's being brought in as an agent. He's the president of the company.
Yeah.
Like, not a lot of folks work their way up from being agent to president of the company. Scott D'Amore did. Shout out to Scott. Something else in the torch. Arguably the biggest philosophical difference between Russo and Jeff Jarrett is that Russo wants to build stars from within, while Jarrett believes the concept of bringing in weekly surprises is important. I mean, is that something you remember being the biggest philosophy difference between you and Russo? Because I would have thought, I don't know, I just wouldn't have guessed that would have been the breaking point or the difference.
It wasn't the big. I mean, it wasn't. But again, we'll go into Wade or Dave, whichever one wrote that. Is that it sounds better as they write it. I don't think either one of those guys would have said that's the biggest philosophical difference, because you can do both. You can have surprises. You can use talent from, other promotions or talent that were already established, but building from within is the primary goal. And it in a lot of ways, it's one of the main things me, Vince, and my father damn sure agreed on. We've got to get AJ Styles. We've got to get James Storm and Chris Harris and, whoever it may be, in the early days, the X Division. When I looked at, and this was maybe a couple of shows ago, when I look at Christopher Daniels, and look, he's working with Moxley coming up. when I look at Christopher Daniels, Elix Skipper, and Low Key, those three that, oh man, we're going to use them as three kind of modern day free bird, da 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 da. What super talented guys they were. I mean,
Yeah, no kidding.
so building from within was something that we all knew we not only wanted to do, we had to do to be successful. There comes a point where there are no more surprises from, yesteryear. There are no more shot in the arms. There are no more, Dusty Rhodes, a legendary name. He's going to run his course just because he's at the twilight of his in-ring career. Just on and on and on. But so when you really break down what you just said that those guys wrote, there's no validity to it, actually. And I don't say that out of like spite. I'm just saying, no, it's one of the things that me, my father, and Vince agreed upon. We got to build stars.
Well, you're trying to build some stars when you put Dusty Rhodes in a ladder match.
Oh, yes.
Him versus Brian Lawler goes 8 minutes and 20 seconds.
It is entertaining. I mean, look at our boy Rudy Charles in this image. So you folks out there that are not watching the YouTube feed,
Dusty Rhodes is climbing a step ladder and doing bionic elbows off of it.
And Rudy has got a wonderful facial reaction. And
Yes,
so
he does.
look at the crowds, kind of pick out each individual. The lady, that's good.
Eventually, he starts climbing up the ladder. David Flair is going to come and attack Dusty from behind. Flair then climbs the ladder. Then Nikita Koloff comes out and knocks Flair off the ladder. Nikita climbs the ladder and grabs the belt. He struggles to release it. Eventually, yanks hard enough that he gets it loose. By the way, this is Ric Flair's actual OG 10 pounds of gold. We're just yanking around out here. It's now in a shadow box in Triple H's office. I mean, this is
this exact one.
Yeah. This is the real belt. Y'all are doing this with the real belt, dude.
And it's not bothering me at all, but a young Conrad Thompson would be just having fits.
Well, listen, I wasn't even collecting belts yet. About 10 years after this, I'd have been fit to be tied.
Okay.
But at this point, no, I didn't care.
Okay.
Eventually, though, he gets it released. Dusty's going to stand up and put up his fist to fend off a potential foe in Nikita. The crowd starts chanting Dusty, and Nikita offers Dusty the belt. Dusty takes it, the two hugs, and Wade would write, for what it was really entertaining. The finish is a bit of a ripoff because everybody wanted to see Dusty climb the ladder. But on the bright side, he did climb a step ladder. And after the match, Eric Watts ran out, rips the NWA title belt out of Dusty's hand, stealing it once again. Star and a half. Listen, Nikita and Dusty, all these years later, that was a feel-good moment, and I'm sure Dusty and Nikita enjoyed it as much as anybody else.
And that's the payoff. So, folks, why the hell would TNA LOL book Dusty Rhodes and Brian Christopher in a ladder match? Because the payoff was we'll call it Dusty and Nikita being reunited. Dusty was into the story. And, when you I get it. We're doing a podcast and we're going back and telling the stories and all, everything that goes with it. And then the star rating issue comes up, 1.5 stars. Like,
no, listen, what did you expect? Did you expect?
That's it. Yeah. I heard that this morning, that if you start out your day, how did the unrealistic expectations are the perfect way to ruin your day from the start.
Yes.
Yeah.
The key to life is great communication and managing expectations. And if you thought Dusty Rhodes was going to go out there, climb the ladder, do a 450,
yes.
I mean, come on, man.
But it was. Go back again in the archives. If you're a Dusty Rhodes fan,
you would love it.
Well, okay. So I'm gonna back up. If you're really a wrestling fan that enjoys the emotion, it was. I mean, I hate to say something great, but I mean, it was when Dusty and Nikita looked at each other, and today knowing the history like none other, it was a cool story. And then here comes smarmy Eric Watts yanking the belt away. Good wrestling. It's emotional content.
Hey guys, it's the hardcore legend Mick Foley here, and I need to call a quick timeout, a brief timeout, because I wanted to tell your listeners what I have been telling Foley is Pod listeners for a while now about all the cool things happening over on adfreeshows.com.
An all-new edition of The Insiders is here, as Conrad welcomes David Zadi, the man behind so many iconic video packages WWF fans grew up on, including one that left Vince in tears.
You got it. And Conrad, I swear, I walked outside the studio, and Vince was sitting down on the concrete floor, crying hysterically, just saying thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. I went up to told Kevin, he says, good job, can't wait to see it. 15 minutes later in the stairwell, Vince is still sitting down in a different spot now, crying, saying thank you. Thank you.
Special guest host Raven sat in for Jake the Snake Roberts on the Snake Pit, looking back 25 years on his rivalry with DDP and an interesting new member of the Flock.
Jimmy Hart comes up to me one day and goes, hey, Hulk would like a favor. I go, what is it? He goes, he'd like you to put Horace in the Flock. I'm like, sure. I'm not going to say no. But it became a running gag like Jericho and Conan. Three of us used to hang out together and call ourselves the triumvirate of useless information. And so they were like, wait, did you put Horace Hogan in the Flock because he's Hogan's nephew? I'm like, what? He's Hogan's nephew? I had no idea.
That's just a small taste, a sampling, if you will, of what we have waiting for you. With 4 levels to choose from. 4. See for yourself why ad-free shows is the best value in wrestling today. Sign up now, right now, at adfreeshows.com. Yeah.
Your boy Mike Barton, aka the former Bart Gunn, is going to lose to Perry Saturn in 7 minutes and 35 seconds. There's a tap out finish here. It's a wrist lock that forces a tap out. Wade would say solid intensity, but not much else of note. Is this just a one-off? Let's just bring Bart in and see what happens, or hey, just come in and relive some wrestling glory one last time, or well, I mean, it doesn't seem as if you had real plans here. Just a one-off, just come say hello to the fans, or what's the thing?
Like a lot of the talent, I mean, and we've talked, we've talked about them over and over and over. A Bart Gunn, even a D-Lo, different folks. Bart specifically, either in between band tours or, I mean, we were one day a week. Nobody was making a full-time living off of us, period. It's that simple. So, you get on the phone with Bart, hey, whether we're wanted him to come in or he reached out and says, hey, you got anything? Well, however it went back and forth. Then we kind of go, Bart, how many consecutive Wednesdays can you give us? Okay, right. 4. And we come back and say, all right, I tell you what, we're going to use you 3. We'll do, something on 1, something on 2. Week 3, we'll kind of do a recap. Week 4, come in, put Perry over, something along those lines. So it was like a lot of the other established stars, as Dutch would say, don't rent, don't buy.
Well, you're buying with D'Lo. He's going to get a win over Mike Sanders, but Wade says this: by not going right into title matches with D'Lo and Jarrett, all of D'Lo's WWE steam has been lost already. Did you listen in this era? I mean, for most of my time as a wrestling fan, I suppose, whenever someone comes what we would call quote unquote fresh off of WWF TV, it feels as if they're going to be able to command a higher fee, and they're going to be in great demand on the independents. And then slowly but surely that whittles away. Slowly but surely they can get less and less money, and they're in less and less demand. So there was often a lot of promoters who were sort of trying to strike while the iron was hot. Is there a sweet spot for when a guy's fresh off TV, we need to do something with him in the first X number of days? Did you have a best practice for that?
Again, what do we say about creative? It's subjective.
Yeah. I'm just asking your personal philosophy.
Well, this is, I guess, a perfect kind of example. Bart Gunn was going back to Japan without question. D'Lo would be a situation that he may say, hey, man, I'd love to be a part of the team every Wednesday. Can we work something out along those lines? TNA will be my first priority. If we know we can play the long game with the talent, then you kind of back up and say, okay, we're going to have some momentum off of him coming in, and let's get him ingrained and get him in the story and all that, but don't blow it off immediately. Our man Cody Rhodes finished the story. Okay. So much debate coming out of WrestleMania, this, that, all that. All right. So now they've got an entire year to go back to this story. Things can happen, things can change. But if you have a talent committed, we'll call in this era in TNA long term, which would have been 6 months or so, then you kind of, I don't want to say pace yourself, but get all you can out of the honeymoon period and then get into storylines. Because there is what you just said. I think you're kind of classing it as, or I like to always would say in the rooms, in the creative rooms, hey guys, the honeymoon doesn't last forever. We've either got to give the babyface wins or we got to get heat on this heel, because there comes a point where he's got to do something meaningful in a story in TNA. The honeymoon of the WWE notoriety quickly fades. So let's milk that for all you possibly can, but you've got to be ready to shift into storylines.
Amazing Red and Jerry Lynn are going to team up to win a 4-way tag match over Shark Boy and Jason Cross, Chris Sabin and Johnny Storm, and Elix Skipper and Christopher Daniels. That's 13 minutes and 40 seconds. The members of the winning team would have to face each other later on to earn an X title shot. And the NASCAR color guy, Jeff Hammond, is actually going to join Mike Tenay and Don West here. And he's going to be talking about growing up on wrestling since the 1970s. So a nice little crossover for some NASCAR fans there. Red then surprises Daniels with a small package for the win. A wide variety of well-executed high spots, but the context of a story never got a chance to develop, so it was nothing more than a spot fest, 2 3/4, according to Wade. But then backstage, we see Goldie interviewing Eric Watts, and Watts is going to say that Jarrett has sent him emails apologizing for choking her last week. Watts says everybody hates Jeff, the fans in the crowd, the wrestlers in the back. And he said, everywhere he's gone, everybody loves him. And that's what makes Jeff jealous. And Watts said, the one person you can count on is him, because he cares. You must live life or life will live you, he said. And unbelievably, Wade goes up his way to say, Watts is good behind the mic in a smarmy heel way. I think you're right, man. This is a different Eric Watts from who we saw a decade before.
Completely different. He was comfortable in his skin, comfortable in the promos. The asylum crowd, he pushed their buttons in the right way. He got over, and I know that the narrative that most people, it's, that go back, and that's why, man, Jarrett, Jeff, you're not ready to go to WCW. First impression, lasting impression is so important. Be ready when you hit that national stage, yada, 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 yada. Eric, came right in WCW and the angle with Arn. And I remember sitting home watching that and like, wow, man, he's on the scene. But, it was Eric Watts in these days of TNA was, at the end of the day, highly entertaining. He could talk, but I wish Eric would have had this skill set when he did have, anyway. Experience.
He would have had the opportunity and the experience and been comfortable enough to do it. But it's great stuff here from Eric Watts, and I've been a big critic of Eric in his WCW days. Different performer here, and it's a different performer that sits down with Mike Tenay. You're going to do a sit-down interview where you're trying to show a guy who's on the brink of cracking. You're going to cut him off and ask, do you have any idea what's going on in my life these days? And you even continue that you can't tell who your friend is anymore. I don't know who my friends are anymore. And Tenay is asking, is it the pressure or is it paranoia? And then eventually out comes Raven, Alexis, and Julio. And Raven's going to tell Jeff to beat up Tenay if it makes him feel like a big man. Isn't it really all about me, Jeff? Isn't it all about Raven? And somebody starts cheering, and Raven says, "Don't you dare cheer me. Shut your mouth." And then that, of course, brings around a little small Raven sucks chant. Security's going to be here to try to hold you back. And then you're going to blindly swing and accidentally hit Dusty to close the show. And it's quite the finish to the show because a lot of people, you know, I mean, they love these cliffhangers. And now last week you were nailing Alexis. This week you're nailing Dusty. This is pretty good storytelling. I like this.
You know, I was just sitting here thinking and looking at that picture of me hitting Dusty, and over there at the booth, you referenced him just a second ago, Jeff Hammond. And just again, kind of the context of, you know, Toby stopped by the show the week before, but Jeff Hammond been on camera. NASCAR in 2002, 2003, and NASCAR in 2023. I can't say night and day, but they were they were red hot. And so Jeff being on Fox, the network, every Saturday and Sunday, and him coming, he loves wrestling, always have wrestling. Just shout out to Jeff because he was one of the early supporters of TNA, and he would come and kind of, his passion was to help us. So I appreciate that. But yeah, again, this is another cliffhanger building toward Jeff cracking and his arch rival, arch nemesis Raven. That's the whole build was, you know, headed that way long before we announced the match.
It's reported in the Observer that TNA and Rena Mero have had talks and that there was a verbal agreement to come into the company in May as a surprise. Jeff, I don't think we ever really saw this. What can you tell us about dealing with Rena Mero, Miss Lesnar now, I suppose?
My best recollection, Russo and her, you know, had their existing relationship from WWF days.
Right.
And it was Vince and her talking, and, you know, the old conversation, what if, are you available? Would you be interested? But that's as far as it ever got.
We know that Jamie Dundee is going to be a part of the operation here with TNA. I mean, listen, if you're going to run shows in Tennessee, it used to be a state law that somebody named Dundee had to be on the show. So it's written here in the Observer. Jamie Dundee is as much of a problem in the locker room as the notorious Eddie G. Both men continue to be booked in syndicated matches, although most of the wrestlers believe it's a rib on Dundee. He's been telling the rest of the locker room the office asked him to purchase a kangaroo costume for an upcoming angle. What can you tell us about Mr. Dundee here?
I have no recollection about the kangaroo outfit, but I'm not saying it's not true. I'd love to kind of have a refresh of that because it doesn't surprise me, but it wasn't a rip. Jamie, man, I hate that the sheets put him and Eddie G in the same. That's not accurate at all. Jamie could always, I mean, look, born and raised in the business, a natural performer. Hell, he could charm you and piss you off all within the same 20 seconds. But that was Jamie. So he, at this time, if I remember, he was working they weren't dark matches. They were matches. Explosion. Before we came on the air, we would film 2 or 3 matches. And Jamie, again, everybody knew him in Nashville. So highly entertaining individual. Like I said, both in and out of the ring.
When was the last time you saw him in real life? A year ago, maybe? Was there a TNA show or a
year ago in Portland? Strawberry Festival show. He sure was.
Dude, I got to meet that guy in real life.
You've never met Jamie?
No. And I just feel like he is one of, you want to talk about an outlaw character. My goodness.
I cannot believe you've never met Jamie Dundee.
I need to get his ass to Top Guy Weekend and just cut him loose. Can you imagine?
Let's do it.
Well, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Scott D'Amore is now going to be starting, of course. And as we understand, he's hopping right in, taking notes, giving finishes, helping produce. Was he just a natural fit right away, or did he too have some early detractors like JB did?
Again, people look, Scott's father, God rest his soul, who is passed away, but was an incredible businessman. So Scott had business acumen from his life experiences. I mean, way back in the day, he worked for WCW, and like you've kind of gone through his history, but Scott was in the wrestling business, but also a businessman as well. And again, fearless in taking direction. And so, yeah, just as it's reported, he took the bull by the horns and dove in, and how can I help? And he earned his keep from day one in the best possible way, really.
Man, that's just cool to hear. It's also reported that you guys are going to be having a Spanish audio feed for your events available the following month. What's the thinking here as far as international expansion? It's not like you needed a Spanish announce table to bust through. There's more to it than that. Talk to me about that.
Direct TV wanted it. The pay-per-view companies they wanted a secondary audio. They wanted the Spanish feed. And again, an expense comes with that. And that was, crawl, walk, run set of circumstances. But once we kind of got our head around, okay, pay-per-view companies want it, we got to figure out how to get it done.
Well, something we don't have to figure out how to get done is how to get our ding dongs real hard. Jeff knows what to do. Chew it and do it. This episode and all of our episodes are brought to you by Blue Chew. Guys, let's talk about sex. Remember the days when you were always ready to go? Well, now you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed at BlueChew.com. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable forms and at a fraction of the cost. That means you can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is so simple. You'll sign up at BlueChew.com, you'll consult with their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA. They're prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. But there won't be anything discreet about your package. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. We got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew for free when you use our promo code MyWorld at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is MyWorld, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. Jeff, you dig any trenches lately?
What the hell are you talking about? Trenches?
Well, just, the stroke. You've been handing out strokes left and right. A few extra with Blue Chew.
Tomorrow night, pal. But go ahead.
Wait, what are you going to do to Dax? When he's unconscious, after he took a guitar shot, you're going to give him the second stroke, another second round?
Would you stop it?
Hey, listen, if the guitar don't knock him down, the Woodrow will. What are we doing? Okay, so the Torch would say this. The infighting between Vince Russo and the Jarretts has picked up again. And boy, listen, we've talked about this in code a little bit, but I think you and I have talked about it like damn near a decade later. This is 03. Quote, there's been a lot of talk that some of Russo's allies have approached Panda's Dixie Carter to complain that the Jarretts are cutting the legs out from under Russo by heavily editing his material. Russo continues to write the show, which the Jarretts eventually edit. Russo has become frustrated with the amount of editing that the Jarretts have been doing to his work, and those in the locker room who are aware of the program are said to be split in which faction they side with. One of Russo's main complaints is that the Jarretts edit anything that takes heat off of Jeff, whom Jerry has told wrestlers he sees as the Dragon Slayer, with the top heels as the Dragon. Russo is also upset that the Jarretts base their opinions on how the Nashville crowd reacts, whereas Russo feels the company should worry more about the national audience than the local crowd. Russo and Jeff have been friends for a number of years, but those close to the situation say it's about to reach a boiling point and are questioning whether the friendship can survive if the situation isn't resolved soon. As of press time, there was a lot of talk that Russo was planning on giving his writing duties in the hopes that the shows would suffer without his input. Meanwhile, there's also talk that Russo will return as an on-air character shortly. I mean, listen, we've talked about this for a long time, and I've asked you before a question that we probably don't have to repeat, but I know you remember it about Vince. when did you know that this was the case, that perhaps there was some back channeling with Russo's quote unquote allies in Dixie?
When did I know it was the reality?
Yes.
You had I mean, to what degree would be the real question, because I had no idea the persistence. But when you look, whether it's talking to Vince or Glenn or Mike Sanders or Raven, or I mean, even Dixie or anybody around Dixie, when you start hearing the questions that are asked, you go, okay, there's an agenda here. You know, that comment that was made, that, and I can remember, bro, you can't listen to this audience. And I would think, what audience are we supposed to listen to? Because how are you going to, like, you gotta listen to the national audience. Okay, how are we going to hear that? Online? Look, and yes, but the small sample group, and we are listening to them, but it's like, you don't listen to the people that actually are coming to watch the product.
Right.
It baffled me that you can't listen to this audience. And that was kind of a running head scratcher, but it was obviously a discussion. And then to add, again, Dixie's a year, not even a year, kind of into the wrestling industry, which would be, and look, as I kind of look back on from time to time, especially in these early years, the compassion comes out, because it's like her set point on the industry from day one was Jerry Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett, but then over here you got Russo and then Glenn, and then just it was such kind of a hodgepodge of differing opinions. But I just referenced a second ago, for sure, one of the things that me, Vince, and my dad agreed on is we got to create new stars. But then that was reported that we didn't agree on it. What a mess. But I knew weekly on the questions or comments that were made that there's kind of a different agenda here, that they're really reading into, and Vince being frustrated at all the edits. Well, was it his show or our show? You know, just a simple fact that he's upset that the boss is making a decision. None of that ever made sense. And look, again, more was made out of it on the sheets than the reality most of the time. But there was a lot of drama, unnecessary drama, that went on backstage. But look, that happens every week at every television show.
Well, it also happened with Sabu in this era. Bob Ryder, who, according to the Torch, many have labeled the Jim Ross of TNA, contacts Sabu after he had a less than awesome experience most recently, trying to get him to come back. And according to numerous sources, this is a report from the Torch, Sabu was unwilling to talk to Ryder and used several expletives, explaining why he would only talk to Jarrett. TNA would like to feature Sabu in the current storyline that involves Sandman, New Jack, and other ECW wrestlers. But Sabu even turns away Scott D'Amore. Scott D'Amore, who I guess was a friend of his, being some Michigan folks, if you will. He denies the request to return to the company and says, hey, if you want me to talk about coming back, you're going to have Jeff Jarrett give me a call, and we'll personally talk through our differences. I don't remember what the differences were. What was Sabu upset about?
I don't know if there was any really main difference, but at this stage of everything, both TNA's growth, Sabu's, at this point, either legendary or attaining. I mean, he wanted, and I can remember us kind of joking, and me and him always had a good relationship, but he's like, I don't want to talk to anybody but the decision maker. The horses, I don't want to talk to the horse's ass. And he would laugh and cut up, but I knew what he meant. And I respected that. He wanted to kind of get an answer. I don't think he had his best showing. I can't remember if it was prior to this set of circumstances. But look, he had a couple of hiccups from time to time, but I think that's what this was about. Like, where are we going with it? And of course, like any talent, what's the creative? What's our pal JR say? Creative and cash?
Yep, cash and creative.
That's what he wanted to know.
Also backstage is Zach Gowen. He's going to be riding down with Chris Sabin. And this is after he had turned down the TNA offer to sign with WWE. What? I mean, listen, I like Zach. We've traded some DMs, but if you had an offer from this company and you didn't, you verbally accepted, but then you went and signed somewhere else, and then you show up not too long after just to hang out, that had to piss old Double J off a little bit. No,
I don't even remember him coming back. But look, Saban, Detroit boy, Zach, Detroit boy. They rode down together, but I don't even remember him. I don't remember this. Look, he's a kid. I was a kid, but I mean, he was really young. I do remember him turning us down and getting the gig, and I immediately thought, man, oh man, Vince McMahon is going to do something unique here.
Well, he did something unique with the Honky Tonk Man. The greatest intercontinental champion of all time is going to claim on his website that he was close to doing a deal to come in. Did you ever have a serious conversation with Honky? I mean, back in the day, my man had white hot heat.
Oh, I think we had multiple kind of one-off conversations like, hey, would you be interested? Wayne's always been a businessman. I mean, hats off to him. And he kind of understood, I'm going to get all the money I can because this thing ain't going to last long. And he knew his, I guess, best opportunities would be come in for a few shows and then get out. I don't know. I don't really remember why he never did come, because my God, all the who's who that came through there, Duggan, I mean, just one after another. I don't know why it never did pan out.
Probably because he needed to be paid like a main eventer, take no bumps and go over.
Okay. Maybe. Maybe that was a minor conversation. I don't know. I'm sure it's reported somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody has a report like that. Now that you've hit Dusty with a chair, he's hot at you and waiting at the building for you on the next program that airs April 16th. Was the little kid in you excited to be working with Dusty? I mean, this is a guy you grew up watching on TV, and now here he is.
It's hard to put into words a motivated Dusty Rhodes, because he's a storyteller. Look, whether it's every talent that I grew up kind of watching in Memphis, Dutch or Lawler or Fargo, Jimmy Hart in his own way, however Lance Russell would tell the story, but storytellers. And Dusty, he liked it. He would say, hey man, I need a little time. And I'm thinking to myself, Dusty, we got a 2-hour show. You'll have plenty of time. And Dusty liked to tell stories. And this was something right up his alley. And the pre-tape we shot, or the live shot, whatever it may be, waiting on me to arrive. Dusty is in his element when he has a story to tell and he's emotionally invested in it.
Well, this is good stuff. And that's just a part of the story. The real story is about you and Raven. That's what we're building towards. Raven's actually going to do a promo before a match with D'Lo Brown about how he doesn't want you to turn this into a Southern wrestling promotion. And it's going to build towards you and Raven on April 30th. It's a one-on-one singles match for the NWA title. Really, since you've had the title, this is your first long built-out storyline. Do you remember, seeing storytelling? Were you and Raven sort of on the same page, or did y'all butt heads about creative at any point?
So the snapshot started in June 2002, financial troubles right out of the gate, going into, we'll say that Panda, that set of circumstances through the month of September. Then you have October, November, December to kind of get things rolling. So as January, the new year rolled around, we kind of made a mindset that, look, it's every Wednesday, but let's try to create some 10-pole events. Like, let's have a big tag title match, the first Wednesday, but build episodically that prior couple of weeks. But we kind of put our, if you will, flag in the ground and knew that we were going to go Jeff Raven, at the end of April. And I think we actually picked out a date and announced it and built toward that, because on Raven's debut, it was shocking. It was compelling. and they kind of knew immediately this is the story. And then we built and built and built and built and built in-ring promos and me as the champion cracking and all that. It was a story. And so we all got emotionally invested in it from a character point of view. And look, did we agree on everything, me and Raven? No. But did we collaborate on it all with Vince and my father and other parties? Yes. We knew the direction we wanted to go. And look, at this point, Raven, he wasn't in long term. Look, I'm sure he wanted more money. He's a businessman. We weren't willing to, we weren't in a position. Again, one night a day, one night a week. But anyway, we put our flag in the ground and built toward Jeff Raven.
Well, we know that we're going to have that match on April 30th. But before we get there, there's some other matches we should at least mention, including maybe in hindsight, maybe not our best idea, but maybe it was. Maybe we're trying to tell a story. Glenn Gilberti is going to hit the stunner and beat AJ Styles clean. You yourself just a moment ago said, man, we're really trying to build AJ. Now we're going to have him lose to a former Disco Inferno. No disrespect to Disco. We all appreciate his mind for the business and certainly the way he pulled that character off, a character that so few maybe could have. But in the eyes of the fans, for lack of a better word, Disco is not perceived as being a quote unquote top guy. And if you want AJ to get there, I don't know if it was a little Vince McMahon to say, let's go have him lose. Why not just have AJ do something spectacular to dispense of Mr. Gilberti?
We had as this kind of story played out, we had and I don't know if it was a 4-week, 6-week, 3-week program, but nobody in that building thought Glenn would win. And by design, let's do the right screw job. And there's distractions and whatever it may be, but it was shocking in and of itself. Like I just said, nobody expected Glenn to win, and AJ is going to get his win back. Again, storytelling 101. That you have to put the protagonist in a compromising situation, but give the fans hope that they're going to see him redeem himself, and that was the simple story.
We should also mention that Eric Watts is going to lay out Dusty backstage with a title belt, and Kid Cash is going to attempt to make up with Trinity, but does so after he defends the X Division title against Mike Sanders, and the Harris brothers beat up Trinity, and Cash just watches. This is a different era for violence against women, I suppose.
When I read that research, I'm like, my gosh, yes.
Another surprise, as if there hasn't been enough. On this show so far, we talked about a surprise return or debut for New Jack, and also a surprise for Bart Gunn. Well, now here we are, new week, new pay-per-view, new surprise. This time, Mike Awesome is going to surprise and make a debut to defeat Perry Saturn by DQ when Sandman and New Jack interfere. But the Torch would point out how heavy Awesome was for this match. Mike Awesome was one of my absolute favorites. I was excited to see him here, even if he didn't look exactly like Mike Awesome used to. What can you tell us about Mike Awesome?
Mike came to Tennessee in the territory days. I think his first job out of Florida, or one of the very first. So we had known each other a long time. And as the sheets weren't kind to him in his appearance, but look, it's Mike, maybe he wasn't exactly like it was. It was that unrealistic expectation. But again, the building blocks of TNA the early years are bring guys in and rent them. Don't mind. That's it. It was that simple. And Mike, what a sweetheart of a guy, man.
He's one of those guys I just felt like for sure when WCW went down and he wound up, doing the one night stand show and well, even before that, he was around the WWF for a cup of coffee. Just in my head, considering how big he was and the stuff he could do on the top rope and that look and all that, it was like Vince McMahon is going to just eat this guy up. He's going to love him. And then it never really happened. Why do you think that was?
It's one of those kind of, I can't call it a head scratcher. Me and you both been around long enough, but it's one of those guys that the timing never really lined up for him. I think is definitely a part of it. B is I would never ever, I don't say Mike was a bad business guy, but he was never aggressive enough. And I don't say aggressive. The initial proactive, yeah, to kind of get in there and push for himself. And there's a part of that you absolutely have to do. You got to take initiative. And I'm not saying, I think Mike was kind of in that way, a dude from the beach that kind of took life on life's terms and see how it rolled. But I'm like you. Had Vince or even, WCW, he was in and out there, but he definitely is a guy that I thought never came close to reaching his potential. Never.
Checks a lot of boxes, put on some incredible performances with Paul Heyman. I just knew it, and it didn't happen.
Yep.
And I hope everybody was listening, not just people in the business, but people not just in the wrestling business, but people in business in general. Listen to what Jeff said there. Sometimes you got to fight for yourself. Sometimes you got to advocate for yourself. And I know that some of our mutual friends, I actually had a friend in town a few weeks ago who said, "Oh, I don't call anybody. If they want to do business with me, they've all got my number." And I appreciate that approach to life, because you don't want to come off as desperate, and they know me, and if they need me. But at the same time, let me just say this, man, if you ain't willing to talk about you, who is? If you ain't going to brag about what you're doing, who is? Don't be in the secret service, as I like to say. Let people know what you're doing.
Randy Savage, who sat me down and kind of gave that lesson. Jeff, you got to stay in the game. You got to absolutely, sometimes he would give it a ship analogy that, hey, you got to stay in the boat. And if you're going to jump from one boat to the next, make sure you have a net, blah, 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 blah. But you got to keep rowing, and you got to stay on top, and not maybe on top, but visible and grind. There's just, he had a mentality, and look, his father taught him so much, and Lanny, and, a family business, and they run IWF, just Randy's whole mentality. When you kind of look at his life story and the baseball, that career didn't pan out, and he got into wrestling, and then they started their own promotion and ran literally opposite of my father's promotion in Lexington and a bunch of other towns, Paducah and up in Illinois. But they ran opposition, and when that didn't work out, most folks' pride and ego would have said, "I'll work for anybody but Jerry Jarrett. I'll go to Texas. I'll go to California. I'll work for anybody but the folks that I've knocked for the last year." Randy had a different mentality. He dove in and said, "Okay, let's make some money out of this." And so I think Randy, for me, was one of those really good examples of staying aggressive, taking the initiative, and saying, "Hey, let's do something here with me."
Somebody else who's going to do that here, different era, Just Incredible is going to make a debut here. Mike Awesome and Just Incredible here. He's going to join the Sandman and New Jack as former ECW members. And the Torch would report that Incredible's in line for a pretty big push. He had left the WWE on some not so great terms, but I'm sure since you guys were both members of the Clique, you guys were boys from way back. Serious business. Tell me about PJ and what you saw in him and why you thought maybe he's worthy of a big push here, according to the Torch.
So I was there when Aldo Montoya, or PJ Polaco, but then he was, they gave him the gimmick of Aldo Montoya. He was in that new generation era. He was super young, 19, 20, 21. But so when he came here, he's early 30s, I think. Hell of a worker. It's like two different folks, but I was like, all right, there is somebody that's young and can go. And, the look of Sandman and Sari Pattern, just that kind of that ECW vibe, that he was a guy that, okay, is he going to be a long-time guy? I don't know, but he's going to be more than a one-off in TNA, I thought. Absolutely. PJ, a lot of talent in that guy.
Next, we get a sit-down interview with Chris Harris and James Storm. Harris is going to defend his decision to wrestle singles matches and to associate with SCX. Storm is going to scoff at Harris's hobnobbing, and Harris is going to say that, hey, we're still a team, and Storm was a little skeptical. So you guys were at least flirting with the idea of breaking them up in 03. It doesn't happen there. These guys were really accidental tag team wrestlers. They both wanted to join your promotion as singles, and they even wrestle on a tryout match against each other. And then somehow, some way, as I understand it, Bob Ryder says, hey, we don't know what to do with them. Let's make them a tag team, and America's Most Wanted is born. Is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it. And it literally, as soon as they started creating some chemistry together, here comes, and I'm not going to put it all on Russo, but Russo really liked Chris Harris, and they had a good relationship. But it's like, guys, you guys are just getting going as a team. Get that run, milk it out. It's like split them up before they're really gotten over. And that's, to me, a real common thread in wrestling creative from since I've ever started watching wrestling is not having the patience to let, I don't want to say the fans dictate it, because sometimes they'll dictate it too soon, but just letting things play out, run its course in so many ways that you just let people get emotionally involved in the story before you start pivoting. And I think a lot of times, I don't want to say it's a lost art, because some folks never have that art, but yes, early these guys wanted to split up, and I don't think the official split up came till years later, and when Chris went off to WWF.
Well, we're glad it took a bit. We're also glad that we got to see Sandman and New Jack arguing about who was cheating at chess. That's real. And then we see Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red team up to wrestle Christopher Daniels and Elix Skipper. They go nearly 15 minutes, and Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red win the tag straps. It's a 4-star match. This is one of those matches you've just got to see, and it's almost maybe forgotten history. I know for whatever reason, a lot of people discount the Asylum era of TNA. There was some great stuff here. You want to talk about innovators. Elix Skipper, maybe one of the most criminally underrated professional wrestlers of all time. Christopher Daniels, maybe a victim of timing. I mean, if that guy was coming on the scene now, he'd be in the world title conversation every week. Amazing Red was almost maybe the biggest victim of timing in wrestling history when you really think about it. This guy could do the stuff that Rey Mysterio could do, but he was doing it for much smaller audiences than what WCW had once upon a time. And then Jerry Lynn, fresh off of an ECW world title run. He's not Mr. JL. He's a badass Hall of Famer. You got 4 dudes here tearing it up. This is really what TNA was all about to me, is these type of matches.
And go in the archives, watch this match. People are on their feet. Those guys tore the house down. They knew how to work a tag. All the credit goes in the world to all 4. And look, it goes without saying, OJL was the glue, but that is not to disrespect Chris or Elix, but all 4 really, really good, really, really good tag match. And the audience, again, in the Asylum days, they were invested in these 4 guys.
Yes. No doubt. Well said. We also know that they're invested in Raven. It's going to be Julio and Alexis taking on Jeff Jarrett in a Clockwork Orange match, 5 minutes and 2 seconds. Raven's going to suplex you through a chair to end it. How many chairs you been suplexed through? Is this the first one? That doesn't sound like something I'd want to do.
Oh no, I think they put 2 together. Clockwork Orange, House of Fun match. It was, again, all toward the build against Raven. It was good. And Julio is a, God almighty, super talent. I wonder what happened to Julio these days. Great talent, man. Really, really good bump taker.
Unfortunately, you have to deal with some PR stuff. Ron Killings is going to do an interview on Extreme Mayhem, the radio show, on April 20th. He's asked why he hasn't been being booked by TNA on a regular basis. Ron says he's clueless about that subject, as clueless as anyone else. And he says so far the kind of treatment he's received from the company has been kind of shitty compared to his recent WWE run. And Then Brian Lawler goes on the No Holds Barred radio show and says, yeah, I took a pay cut because the company was suffering financial problems, and the company officials promised me a new contract once those problems were resolved, but I've yet to receive it. And I'm so anxious to get back to WWE and just waiting on that opportunity. And I want to prove myself. These guys actively work for you, and they're not too shy about being negative in public. Got to be a better way to handle our business here, Jeff. What did you think at the time, and what do you think now with the benefit of hindsight?
I don't specifically remember either one of them, but going back in time and knowing my relationship with both guys, and then kind of understanding, look, I think there's a lot to be said for PR training. I saw an interview not long ago on Jordan, and I think about how would Michael Jordan have handled the political climate of today in his playing days. And it'd be interesting because there's so much more exposure. You know, he used to do his post press game conference, and that's about it. Now with Twitter and Instagram and streaming, and you're interviewed 15 different times and comments, it's just a different world. But I'm saying this to say that me and Ron were tight. And, you know, an interviewer say, well, Ron, you can't be happy about not being on TV. And Brian, you can't be happy about getting a pay cut. And so, you know, you deserve better. And I'm sure you're itching to get back to WWE. What do you say?
Right.
Oh, it's, you know, leading the witness and all, however you want to say it. I just think there's so much value in kind of understanding who's interviewing you and how they're going to interview and what kind of soundbite they're looking for coming out of it. Because I'll go on Brian Lawler. Every conversation we had with folks, and that was, I'll never forget it, me, Keith Mitchell, we're sitting in Municipal Auditorium when we had the conversation with Keith about, here's the reality. We got a call last night from Health South, and they told us, not only are we not funding you going forward, we're not paying for last night's show. So Keith was conversation one, and then every conversation thereafter, and that's how I went to Dixie and said, hey, here's a situation. Well, with talent, we basically said, we're going to pay you what we owe you, but you're not coming back under those terms. Do you want to come back under these terms? It happened across the board with all the talent. So financially with Brian, and then with Ron, he had understanding he wouldn't be on every week. He also was driving in from Charlotte. So look, it's the nature of the beast. I don't want to say folks just looking for clickbait, but a lot of times interviewers will ask talent to try to prop them up, to basically say, hey, Brian, you're really a WWE talent, right? Well,
right.
What are they going to say? Anyway, it didn't bother me at all, Conrad, back in those days.
You know, it tickled me, you know, just the way it was phrased, you know, where both guys, would they go back to the company? Well, yeah. And I thought to myself, hell, even Jeff would have went back right then. But you and I never really talked about that, though. Listen, things are, you've got a life raft, but things are not awesome. You're not just,
no,
you know, the cash is not just pouring in. We're still losing money. We're still trying to pull the nose up on this thing. This has not gone according to plan. And I know it didn't happen, but hypothetically speaking, if you're home at night here and end of a long day, getting ready to go lay down, house phone rings, you look at the caller ID and there's a 203 area code. You answer and it's the chairman on the other side. And he says something like, Jeff, listen, let's put all this silly stuff aside. Why don't you come home? Let's get you back on the program here. I'll try to call, if you're cool with it, I'll try to call up your old man. We'll try to work on taking what you guys have built and make it developmental, but we want you back on the big show. You'd have to at least consider that, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, consider it is you got to consider any and all options, at least take a hard look. But, you know, we're a year in. Conrad, that's funny. You've never asked me that. You've never phrased it that way. I mean, when I kind of think back as you were going down that, when I had that conversation in 2019, 18 was the Hall of Fame, but 19 was when, hey, come back. It's just kind of a different set of circumstances. So we're talking 2003, receive that phone call. Let's kind of, what you just said, take what you have and let's try to figure this out. Boy, Conrad, as our pal Brew, what if that would have happened?
See, that's the thing. Like, I'm sure some of our listeners, when they hear me say to you, oh, well, Killings was basically insinuating he would have went back to WWE, and Lawler said he really wanted to jump at the chance to prove himself. I'm sure some of our listeners were like, well, man, that had to hurt Jeff's feelings. I was thinking to myself, shit, no, Jeff would have been tickled to do it too. Like the idea behind it, yes, we want to create something, but the reality was Jeff created, I mean, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but you created TNA because you saw there was an opportunity to make money in wrestling. Now, a year later, we see maybe there's not as much opportunity as we thought, but if there's an opportunity to go back and make some big bucks and still spin off what we've been working, shit, yeah, we'd figure that out, right?
It's all about, I watched, you ever watch TED Talks?
Yes.
There's a great one by Guy Kawasaki about 10 points of innovation. But I thought, the void in the marketplace was there without question. Did we hit 1,000 roadblocks? Yes. But you kind of doing a hypothetical here. What if at the end of the day, you do it to, yes, a paycheck, yes, create financials, but it's not just the adventure, but let's go down this road and see where it takes us. And as a part of the entrepreneurial spirit that some folks, Conrad, have and some don't. And I think what you just laid out, that would have been, hey, well, Vince, I appreciate that. So get back on the big show. But I think I would have also said, we got this. How's this developmental? And I may have really dove into that, yes, be a talent, but also how can we make this work? That's there's more there would have been a pathway for success to that as well. That's an interesting thought. That really,
I mean, really and truly, in this era, if that would have happened, essentially what you guys were building would have become NXT. I mean, even when you think about wrestling in the soundstage in Orlando, how is it different from NXT and Full Sail? All they did was copy your model, but because they had a hard on for you, much like they had a hard on for Dusty, they just said, well, shit, we'll just do it on our own. But like you guys had literally been doing wrestling in a soundstage for a long time before they ever decided to do that.
Yeah. Interesting.
And by the way, take a look at all the guys who came through your league and then wound up there. Kind of were their unofficial developmental league anyway.
Well, me and a few folks have had that conversation a lot.
Let's see. And the jack of all trades for you was Jeremy Borash. I wonder where he's at. And Terry Taylor was here. And these days he's
Where's Scott Demore at? You just kind of look at
and there was Road Dogg, and now so listen, your man Samoa Joe, he's the Ring of Honor champion in this era. He's scheduled to appear on an upcoming pay-per-view, and they would write in the torch, Joe is a strong style wrestler who was originally trained by Cincinnati Red in Southern California in 99. Now he's going to be coming in here, and there's a little drama brewing according to the newsletters. The Observer has a whole write-up about these Jarretts and Russos. The biggest stuff behind the scenes is that the power of Vince Russo has increased. And Jerry Jarrett at this point is out of the picture when it comes to writing, according to more than a few sources. As has been mentioned here, the situation between the two sides has come to a head in recent weeks, which isn't so much a power play as attempts at writing autonomy. While Jeff Jarrett has the ultimate say on everything, he was heavily influenced by his father. Those close to his father are saying Jerry is pulled out to give Russo enough rope to hang himself, as he's done in the past here. What may have precipitated this was Russo threatening to quit if they didn't stop overruling him. Those internally watching the dynamics believe it will end up with Russo having more power when it comes to autonomy at some point, because both of Raven's influence with Dixie Carter and the belief that Russo was really the Panda People's Choice from writing for the beginning, and because he'll fight for it, and frankly, Jerry Jarrett won't. The most obvious deal was Jeff doing the job in the handicap match to Alexis and Julio, which Jerry would have a few weeks earlier talked Jeff out of doing. The difference is that Raven is in Russo's ear. There wasn't nearly the nonsense and stupidity this time out. So a lot to unpack here. Clearly, Dave is a big fan of Raven's influence. Let's just take that piece by piece. Do you remember your father at different times having an attitude of, I just want to give Russo enough rope to hang himself? Not
No,
literally, you know what I
no,
mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah, no. The boy, it is the analyst, the critic's job to kind of wordsmith and create a vision and a picture and a story. But at the same time, this is 03, 04, my dad in real estate development, the Cumberland Place project. I mean, he had a lot of stuff going on there as well. Him giving Russo that it's not there. And then it's newsletter kind of chatter. And Vince, I think you said something about an ultimatum. I don't really recall that. And then my old man believed in baby faces getting beat, building to the blow off. That was just his mentality. That is, I mean, it's just how it went. That he had a philosophy. That's why he loved heat on heels, because they're going to pay to see the get the ass kicked. So go ahead. I jumped ahead a little bit on the unpacking there, but no, my old man, look, he believed in take as much, he'd say, Jeff, it's got to be your show. I'm going to give my input, and he'd be strong-willed about it. But Vince Russo would be just as strong-willed. But it's up to me to kind of make the call.
Talk to me a little bit about you taking the loss, because it's pointed out in the Observer that they feel like your dad would not have been an advocate for that. He wants you to be the top guy. Of course, we know he's doing what's tried and true in Memphis with Jerry Lawler, and maybe Lawler wouldn't have done that, so Jeff shouldn't do that. And we've heard that same philosophy before from Bruce on Something to Wrestle when the WWE was in a transition, when Hulk Hogan is no more and now Brett is the face of the company. And people at different times said, well, we don't know how to market Brett. We don't know what to do with Brett. What should we do with Brett? And the statement that they kind of came around to is, what would we do for Hulk? So let's do for Brett what we did for Hulk. I'm sure that's what your dad was trying to do with you, what had worked with Lawler. Was that the philosophy? And do you think he would have tried to veto you taking that loss?
He wouldn't have tried to he wouldn't have vetoed that. He would have made sure that his babyface was a big time kick ass before that happened, and that it was underhanded, lying, cheat, and steal. I was
Unfair.
Is an unfair loss. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's what he was adamant about. He never liked heels just beating baby faces. He didn't see any money in that. Or
The Torch reports more of the same, that there's a lot of this infighting going on. I'm curious from your perspective, and you've told us before at different times you didn't read it or didn't pay attention to it at all. But when you see stories about your company and your family and what at the time might be your best friend and Vince Russo, and it's all in the Observer and it's in the Torch, does part of you get frustrated? Like, where's all this coming from? Can everybody not just shut their mouth? Or talk to me about that.
And I try to go back and think through a Jeff Jarrett lens 2003 versus a Jeff Jarrett lens of 2023. So I know I can only kind of, I can only kind of articulate my best recollection, but I knew my father talked to Wade, or I thought he talked to Wade, and I knew, we'll call it the Russo camp, whether it's Gilberti or whoever talked to Wade. I mean, everybody talks to everybody. I've known that for a long, long time. I was always amazed 20 years ago or 20 plus years ago at the amount of sources that they would kind of gather. Nowadays, none of that surprised me. You're not going to keep anything. It's just, and I can sit here and complain about it, which I don't, because that's the world we live in. If you're going to keep something quiet, you better keep it in a very small nucleus. That's just the nature of the beast. So that didn't bother me. What concerned me was Dixie Carter / Dallas's interpretation of what was written, because I had compassion. They truly didn't understand. How do they know all this stuff? And is all this stuff true about the company I'm funding? You know, how is Bob Carter supposed to, without, fresh into the business? Okay, they're writing about a company that I'm funding, and I don't know what in the hell is true and what's not true. That became a problem.
I got to tell you, you are the king of old school, because you can keep a secret. When you made your debut for AEW, you and I had been speaking almost every day. And then one day you send me a text and you say, "Hey, partner, need to have a call with you. And you get a minute, give me a shout." So I give you a call and I said, "Hey man, sorry about that. We had an offsite today at the mortgage biz and it just took all freaking day. It's just now 2:30 and I'm finally going to hit some sort of a drive-through and get something to eat. I'm starved. What's going on?" And you said, "You don't know?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "Oh, quit playing games with me, Connie. You don't know?" "I don't know what." "Guess where I am." I don't know. Did Cody break his other arm? What's going on?" "I'm in Baltimore." "Okay. Go see our pals at Jimmy's." No, I'm on the show tonight." "Wait, you're at the AEW show?" Kept it all totally quiet. Nobody told me anything. But I do find it fascinating that people still want to go. Maybe the proper phrase is control the narrative. Maybe they're not necessarily intentionally giving scoops that hurt the business, but they do want to give scoops because, well, sort of you scratch my back, I scratch your back sort of thing. That sort of thing happens, boys and girls.
Yeah.
And it feels as if in recent years and months and weeks, we have seen a lot of political angling through the newsletters. And you yourself have said earlier in this program, "Hey man, you got to get out there and keep your hat in the game and stay in the boat," and all your machoisms. But I don't remember you ever trying to leverage the newsletter. So, like, in your mind's eye, is that just a separate, non-money making, doesn't matter? Because it does feel like there's a lot of controlling the narrative. So you'll have people say, "Oh, you can tell who talks to Sean Ross Sapp," and you'll have other people say, "Oh, you can tell who talks to Dave Meltzer," or, "Well, everybody knows who is Mike Johnson's friend," or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Why did you never play that game?
Really putting my thinking cap on the that's, I mean, because that's, I guess I'm damn sure never really been asked that. I'm going to go back to my set point on human nature. I hope you follow me on this. I've always looked at social media as, obviously it's it's debatable how big or how small the audience is, but folks that are interested in professional wrestling. And I go back to the Louisville Gardens or the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis or the Fairgrounds or any of those weekly events that I would go to since before I started wrestling, even pulling the ring and Jeff Leonard refereeing. But then, breaking in and doing all that is that human nature can be very, very confusing or baffling or head scratcher unless you really open your eyes and do a lot of listening. Because I've said it on this podcast many times, the same fan that when I would go to the ring as Jeff Jarrett and crank up Robert Palmer, Simply Irresistible, that same character that would go to the ring as a babyface and get literally dog cussed. I mean, called everything under the sun by groups of guys or this or that or whatever it may be. Those same group of guys are the same ones waiting in the alley after the show and running up and saying, "Can I get your autograph? Hey, where are y'all going after the show? Can we hang out? We're going down here to the market and we're getting gas and we're headed back to home. Okay, I'll meet you down there. Hey, that was a great match you had," all that kind of stuff. human nature, and I'm not going to say just of the wrestling fan, it's just kind of how the world works. So me trying to, I think what you said, use the internet and the narrative, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's not real. It's whichever way the wind blows. It's impossible if you truly think you can control the narrative. And folks that sit back, like you just said, Conrad, and you're not the only one, but many folks can sit back and go, okay, this guy's talking to this guy, and this guy's talking to this guy. Okay, and here's this, and okay, this, he's positioned this, he's posturing there. It's not that hard to figure out. And here's what I've found. I'm going to throw it back at you. Do you see some folks out there that literally get caught up in their own press and they start to believe they're zooming themselves or working themselves into a shoot, or got it there? You can come up with a 1,000 different little sayings, but do you see folks that try to control the narrative end up being controlled by it because they're trying to control? Man, that sounded confusing. Does that make sense?
Of course.
It's
amazing, isn't it?
You care to elaborate or help maybe clean up what I said? Because that's almost at times, I don't say enjoyment, but it's oh, I see what they're doing here. So does the rest of the world.
Well, let's just say you can see certain wrestlers trying to control the narrative through the newsletters, through social media, through likes, through quote tweets, through subtweets. And don't get me wrong, you and I've had a lot of conversation about, business can be done on social media for sure.
Oh, for sure.
But there's a way to do it where it draws money, and there's another way to do it where you're just being a political animal. Like either it's furthering a story or it's real life backstage politics. And frankly, as much as we sit here and say, man, you got to put yourself out there, blah, 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 all that we did about Mike Awesome, there's something to be said about, man, if it requires this, I don't know that I want to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, cause there's people who, wield a lot of influence behind the scenes who sometimes, maybe do a little too much. Maybe.
It's
Maybe.
interesting. It is. But the fact that, you're talking about it, it kind of goes into the whole macro look at it that, wow, what a fascinating industry. It's a $12 billion industry today, and down on the very micro tweet by tweet basis, it's silly. It's fascinating. I love it.
Let's also talk about this era, 2003, because there's a little bit of a split, I guess. Jarrett supporters are blaming Russo and his camp for booking confusing matches that leave fans to decide whether the wrestlers are baby faces and which are the heels. Quote, Russo has never known the difference between heels and baby faces, one observer critiqued. Is that a fair criticism? Did Russo believe in 2003? Bro, good guys and bad guys are played out, bro. Is that the thing?
That's lots been made of it, but he truly believed in the different shades of gray, and there is validity to that. But at the end of the day, the confuse them, you lose them. I would say, yes, Vince, I hear you. There's no such thing, and there wasn't even when they did the Westerns. John Wayne or whatever cowboy you want to say, he had different slants, and they would have different character flaws, whether it be women or trust or whatever it may be. Yeah, there's different shades, but you are also, man, Toby Keith is so wise. It's know your audience. If you confuse them, you're going to lose them. So don't try to get too complicated. And again, a lot of times folks would say, critique this and critique that. And I would interpret it as you're really writing what you like. Let's not write what you like. Let's write what the fans like, what they can understand, what they can digest. More importantly, at the very top of it, what they'll pay to see.
Maybe they needed something fresh, and maybe you do too. Maybe you think you've been in a bit of a rut. Can I recommend HelloFresh? HelloFresh is going to take the hassle out of mealtime this spring by delivering you pre-portioned ingredients and easy to prepare recipes right to your door. So skip the checkout lines and get outside in the warmer weather, because HelloFresh has dinner covered. They really are America's #1 meal kit. Jeff and I have experienced this firsthand. We get to skip the trip to the grocery store, and we count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. By the way, you can cut down on your food waste by 23% compared to regular grocery shopping, because HelloFresh has pre-portioned ingredients. You know exactly what you need. You won't be overcooking. You won't be wasting money. And at the same time, you get to spend less time in the kitchen. Not only is it 25% cheaper than takeout, not only is it cheaper than grocery shopping, it's faster than all that too. You see, you can have the quick and easy meals like HelloFresh's fast and fresh pineapple chicken tacos, or a falafel power bowl, ready in 15 minutes or less. What I really like is how HelloFresh keeps our taste buds on their toes. They got 40 different recipes and over 100 seasonal and convenience items to choose from each and every week. And by the way, there's so much variety. That means there's options for everyone, no matter the lifestyle. By the way, HelloFresh is not just for dinner. They've got some snacks covered for you. They've got lunches. They've got seasonal celebrations. They got festive gatherings. Whatever you're looking for, man. You're throwing a big party, they can help with that. You got the in-laws coming in from out of town, they can help with that. You got a special holiday plan or a birthday dinner, they can help with that. But just your regular old weekend lunch or Thursday night with the fam. By the way, it's fresh. How fresh? Well, the ingredients go from the farm to your house in less than 7 days. This has been a game changer for me. I have to admit, I'm pretty good on the grill, but I was a little intimidated. But man, they make it so easy with these instructions. It's got pictures, by God. If me and Jeff can do it, you can do it too. And it pays dividends to cook with your family. I'm telling you, your wife is going to be surprised when you say, hey, I'm going to help. We're going to cook together. Come on now. Go to HelloFresh.com/MyWorld50. Use our promo code MyWorld50. Buddy, you're going to get 50% off. Plus your first box ships for free. That's HelloFresh.com/MyWorld50. Use the promo code MyWorld50 for 50% off. Plus your first box shipped for free. That's HelloFresh.com/MyWorld50. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. So it's noted in the Observer that Scott D'Amore is doing well, but perhaps he should spend some more time in the truck, because you guys maybe were a little too obvious showing a blade job happening on TV. We know that once upon a time, Scott would become familiar back there. Who would have been running it in this era? Was this still Keith Mitchell? Was he the director or someone else?
Oh yeah, no, Keith was the producer and director during this era. I think Mike Miller, but anyway, look, I don't want to say 90. I mean, most of the time when you see something like that, it's all in communication. And Scott, whether he's in the truck or on headsets at go position or whatever it may be, best laid plans can go awry. That when talent are doing live TV and you have something specifically laid out and it's time to get the job done, sometimes the timing's just off. But it's that director sitting in that seat. No matter how prepared he is, things can go wrong, and sometimes they make the wrong call. That's live TV for you.
A week before your big match with Raven, we see a backstage interview with Goldie and Alexis. And Alexis says she wants to rip Jarrett's ball sack off and shove it right down Goldie's throat. Eventually, she's going to confront and shove Grandma Sarah, who sells tickets. Talk to me about Grandma Sarah.
Sarah Lee, her husband, Corsica Joe, and they were a couple that Sarah is a former lady wrestler. I mean, from the era of 50s and 60s. She was close with my grandmother, Christine Jarrett. She sold tickets out at the fairgrounds way back in the day, if I recall. My grandmother did ringside. Sarah did general admission. But Sarah was, and her husband, Joe, would come to the matches. But Sarah was full of energy, sweet lady, but it's just they don't make them like her spunky, but she could cut a promo. And again, Russo, my dad had known her for years, but Russo would get to know Sarah, and that Asylum crew, from you name it, production, not just talent, not just what you saw on camera, but off camera. We were a small, lean and mean group, but again, Sarah getting there early, getting the box office ready and all that, she got to know everybody and her stories, and everybody got to know her and liked her. And so it was easy to write her into different bits and pieces. And we did.
Let's talk about Russo here for a minute. He has just recently announced his retirement on TV, of course. And even though he's backstage and still working and writing, he mistakenly walks into the background of a promo that Jim Mitchell is cutting. And I wondered at the time, is that a mistake? Like, did he really walk into the shot and not realize it? Because that seems unlikely. Or is this just a little wink, wink? He's still here, bro.
My understanding, it was a mistake, but okay. I don't recall. But I don't remember us writing that in. I'll say that.
Sandman comes out after a Just Incredible and Slash match, goes to a no contest, but my man's bringing out a flaming kendo stick. That's something I hadn't seen before. A flaming kendo stick.
You got to love the Asylum. That photo, that image on YouTube right now that's being shown. Sandman with a cigarette lit in his mouth and cracking the hell out of our man, Wolfie D of the New Church.
Eric Watts is going to walk to the ring and call out Raven. Julio De Niro comes out instead. Watts says he wants to talk, not fight. So, of course, De Niro punches him and Watts chokeslams him. Udo run in and go nuts on Alexis with a DDT and a stroke for De Niro. And then you power bomb the former or the future Mickie James through a table. You're the baby face, beating up chicks left and right. Look at you.
Good old storytelling.
Good old storytelling. Russo does a pretty rare interview on the radio here. And originally it was supposed to be Raven on the show, but I guess Raven wasn't available. So Russo fills in. Takes a lot of shots at WWE. Says he did not watch WrestleMania. Quote, I can't sit through 5 minutes of that show and have my intelligence insulted. They desperately need change. And when asked if he was going to order the Backlash pay-per-view, Russo says, I'm waiting with bated breath. As for his own writing, he said TNA is attempting to reinvent the wrestling business. Quote, it's a new time, a new era. If you don't evolve the product, it will die on the branch. The reality is that nobody is 100% good guy and 100% bad guy. That's fairy tales. We're trying to be real. We're not writing for the internet crowd. We're writing for the masses. And this is around the same time that Jeff Hardy is going to be let go. Quote, TNA officials were unable to find out the terms of Jeff Hardy's WWE release in time for him to appear on last week's show. The office is using Ron Killings to help with negotiations, as Killings and Hardy have been friends for a number of years. In related news, Hardy recently told friends he's not interested in flying around the country as an indie wrestler. The good news for TNA is that Hardy lives within driving distance of Nashville. So listen, on the one hand, we got Russo, damn WWE, bro. But at the same time, a big star of theirs is available. We got to figure this out. How excited were you to try to talk to Jeff Hardy?
When I go back and we dive into 2003, all the different moving parts, and gosh, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, they weren't around. This is all newsletter stuff. I was very excited about the possibility of Jeff, like big time. I don't even recall Vince doing an interview, and it's interesting to hear that he subbed for Raven. Wonder if they had who knows? Just who knows? And again, consider the source in that I'm sure the people that scored the interview with Russo, of course, they're going to ask about WWF stuff. It makes great clickbait sound bites.
It would be in the newsletters. The story going around the TNA office is that Ed Ferrara recently contacted Russo in the hopes of trying to get his job back in TNA. The entire office staff was laughing at Ferrara, as there had apparently been some bad feelings over his decision to quit the company while they were going through financial problems prior to the sale to Panda. Keep in mind, at the time for our left TNA, the office was all smiles about his departure and went out of their way to spread the word he left on good terms to pursue other interests. Do you remember this? Ed trying to come back and you guys being like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks.
I vaguely remember him reaching out, and because it wasn't to me, but it was inquiring. And I thought, if people trying to make this story, because me and Ed left on good terms, he was pretty matter of fact about it. I remember my father, after however all that went down, my father goes, "Hey, I respect Ed. He wants off the ship, doesn't mind telling us he's gone." But him inquiring, I thought, is that just kind of a made up story? He's checking in on us. Does he really want to come back? Because he has to know the terms he left on. It's and the set of circumstances that are going right now, that not that we didn't want him, but probably not the best timing when we're fighting for our existence.
There's another creative note that makes the Observer here. Jarrett rejected Russo's idea of having the ECW faction hang him from the ceiling at the end of the show. Meanwhile, the ECW faction vetoed Jarrett's plan to hit them each with chair shots before being overpowered by all of them. Listen, I'm sure a lot of this is not necessarily vetoing. It's just creative. We're trying to come up with the best idea. But the idea that they were trying to hang my man from the ceiling, how serious did that ever get?
I'm wondering what was the compromise, or what did we do? Or did they really pitch hanging me from the ceiling? Because from a production point of view, I don't know how they would have done that, but good story. But I wonder what the compromise was.
The rumor in the locker room, according to the Torch, is that Dusty Rhodes is the highest paid talent besides yourself. Would that sound right to you at this era?
Yeah. I mean, that was Dusty just had an agreement. This is what he wanted weekly. He wanted to be paid before he got there. And it was just, we used Dusty, and we were reporting on it here, as a conduit for, at times, 2 stories at a time, maybe 3. But there was a period when Dusty was on the show that he was the highest paid guy.
WWE is going to be in town and run SmackDown on April 22nd here in Nashville. And you guys have a bunch of employees there passing out free tickets for the next day and a week after. And there's even some fans, some TNA regulars, who bring signs in that, of course, WWE confiscates. One of which said 6 more days until Jarrett versus Raven. That's pretty cool, though, that you guys are doing some grassroots. Is this a you call, or whose idea is this? Let's get some talent, boots on the ground, passing out tickets.
I think it was an inner office call that, like, hey, they're coming. Can we guerrilla market it? I mean, every kind, and I know 20 years ago, it's much different than it is today. But back in those days, you go to music, you go to an event, you're going to have some type of guerrilla marketing on some kind of event coming up soon. It's 101. I don't know who internally, I'm not even going to say it was Dixie's call, but somebody internally said, hey, SmackDown's coming. Let's go spread the word down there. That's a laser focused audience.
Well, we know we're finally here. This entire episode was built around telling the story of the first real story you had as an NWA champion, where you told it episodically week after week. It finally builds up to April 30th, you and Raven. And we open the show with a shot of you arriving at the arena earlier in the day. You've got a whole bunch of security with you, so it looks like a big deal. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure on you to make this show because, I mean, listen, you're hoping that all this storytelling is paying off, and this is going to be a big buy rate, right?
Yes. I mean, the whole design was, let's go for the 10 pole events based around 2 or 3 major storylines. Well, this being around the title storyline, this was our big one of the arc. And in our world, we were certainly swinging for the fences.
Throughout the show, we've got comments from AJ Styles and D'Lo Brown, like, whoever wins has to deal with them next. They're the next set of contenders. So we're trying to plant those seeds for the people who are tuning in maybe for the first time. We also show Mike Tenay do a sit-down interview with Ron Killings and Conan, who seemingly have formed an alliance against discrimination in TNA. Killings is going to throw in some motherfuckers and reminds everybody that, hey, I'm a former NWA champ and I can't even get a title match these days. The idea of putting Ron Killings and Conan together and say that there's discrimination in TNA, is this a Russo idea? I mean, to be controversial like that? Because we know eventually art imitates life and Conan sues. Maybe nobody knew that was going to happen at this point, but still feels like a Russo idea more than a Jerry Jarrett idea.
Yeah, and I'm not going to put it all on Vince, though, because Conan has a strong-willed and had a vision, and, you know, this is a hell of an antagonistic platform, if you will. And Ron, truth, pardon the pun, but, you know, it was true. He was a former NWA champion, and he wasn't in the title picture. And that, you know, he was in the title picture, 6 months prior to this. So there was, again, life imitating art, art imitating life. And so that was kind of their platform. But I would agree with you that it would much more come from, but, you know, I say that, and then I say, you know, old man, that's kind of right up his alley as well. Kind of push certain buttons. And, you know, the whole Kaufman thing was, Andy, make fun of Southerners and, you know, just kind of push. Nobody did that back then. It was controversial content. Mole Man loved that as much as Russo. They may have had different avenues to get there, but they both love controversial content.
Man, I love talking about Sleep Me sleep systems. Are you someone who needs extra recovery from that last workout? Or maybe you're like me and you just sleep hot in general? Well, you don't need to suffer, wake up tired, or wake up sore with Sleep Me's award-winning sleep systems. You see, this is a mattress topper that goes over your current mattress. You don't need a new mattress, but what it does is it uses water's amazing thermal powers to cool your bed down as low as 55 degrees. And that means no matter how hot you get, you can always sleep at your ideal temperature. Sleep Me makes customizable, climate-controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your entire well-being. Prior to Sleep Me, man, I was tossing and turning. I was up and down and fighting with the covers. I'd have to crank down the AC. Seriously, I was sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night. Not anymore. Now I'm getting a full night's sleep, sleeping 7, 8, sometimes even 9 hours. Man, I just wake up feeling refreshed. I don't need a nap in the afternoon. I don't have that afternoon crash. All that is a thing of the past. And I know I'm having bright, vivid, colorful dreams for the first time. That tells me I'm getting that REM sleep. Now, these sleep systems work on all types of beds, even your adjustable beds. And maybe you've got a partner who likes a different temperature at night. Well, I do too. No sweat here either, by the way. They've got configurations for dual temperature control. My wife actually likes to get into a warm bed, but then she doesn't want to get all hot and sweaty, so it cools her down. That's right. It drops the temperature. She schedules that. So she climbs in a warm bed. It cools her off so she sleeps great, and then it warms her up to wake her up. She set her schedule one time, and now she's doing it every night. It's pre-programmed. How do you beat that? And right now, Sleep Me has 2 water-based sleep systems, the Dock Pro and the Cube. The sleep systems are going to go ahead and get your bed down to 55 degrees. And the Dock Pro, man, it's their newest, most powerful system. It has a perfect sleep climate. No matter what you're doing, maybe it's your body's heat load or the room temperature, your bed is going to be the perfect temperature. If you need better athletic recovery or you're suffering from hot, uncomfortable sleep, you just got to check out sleep.me/myworld. That's sleep.me/myworld. As a listener to this podcast, you'll save 20% off on a sleep system if you use the promo code MyWorld. This really is a game changer. You need to check it out. That's sleep.me/MYWORLD. Sleep.me/myworld. You'll save 20% using our promo code MyWorld. We got some great wrestling on this show. Match 4 is Chris Sabin winning a 4-way match over Jason Cross, Jimmy Rave, and Shark Boy. Really a great X Division style matchup. 3 stars in the Observer. Amazing Red is going to pin Kid Cash to capture the X Division title in a 3-star match. That goes 9 minutes and 15 seconds. And a masked man wearing a black mask is going to attack Kid Cash from behind. That gives Red the chance to score the pin. And the same mystery man then DDT's Red after the match as he's celebrating. And then it's time for the big match, the main event, match number 6 of the pay-per-view. And while we're here, it's Jeff Jarrett and Raven. And they're going to go 17 minutes and 33 seconds. I'm not making this up. 13 people interfered. Alexis Lurie interfered. Julio De Niro interfered. Sandman interfered. Just Incredible interfered. Perry Saturn interfered. New Jack interfered. Mike Awesome interfered. Brian Lee interfered. Slash interfered. Mike Sanders interfered. Ron and Don Harris interfered. And then, with a torn bicep and all, as a surprise appearance, one that wasn't even finalized until the day of the show, as the ECW crew is laying out Jeff Jarrett, the lights go out and the crowd is super hot, it's Sabu. My goodness. What do you remember about this?
Specifically Sabu or just everything?
Everything. Talk me through it.
Well, where do we start? I was just sitting here thinking about 13 in the Cody Roman match. How many people ran in? 6, 5. Anyway, it's funny how that was kind of the lead of Dave reporting the amount of people that ran in.
Well, he's got to have something controversial. And listen, I'm
not even debating that. The thing that I guess that's why I'm trying to think of the jumping off point. Arriving at the building, and I'm going back on the still that was showed earlier on the YouTube feed.
Yes.
Arriving at the building, the call time, if you will, on Wednesdays, I would get there at 10, but I think Talent got there at 1. At about 2 or 2:30, people began to line up for a doors open at 6, shows at 7. I think we did doors at 6 every week. So for people to start lining up that early, and then they kept lining up and kept lining up and kept lining up. And I stayed inside, and I remember folks saying, hey man, there's more than our regular usuals that were the first 30 or 40 that usually came around, I'll say 4:30 or 5. This time they came at 2 or 2:30. That kind of anticipation, like, oh, okay, there's some folks out there. By 5 or 5:30, that line was way long. I mean, it went, you got to know the fairgrounds or what used to be there. Now the soccer stadium's up there, but it went down 2 buildings. I mean, it was a really long line, really early, which I went, okay, these people want in early and they're coming. Well, by 5:30 or 6, I remember folks coming to me and saying, there ain't no way we can get all these people in here. And I'm like, yeah, right. I didn't think they were, we'll get them in. We'll get them in. And they're like, no, there isn't going to be. So, okay, get the cops and security, and we got to make sure and start letting them in. And that kind of buzz and excitement that, you fill up a building immediately. And I'm sure we started the doors early or best we could. And so when you have a full house immediately filled in, look, there's a sense of energy that goes into that. And so, which I believe the energy completely transfers into the talent, and not only the talent and the production, and everybody just is hyped up and keyed up and everything. And then when you go to the ring that night and you know that this is the match, it's an adrenaline rush without question. So, we wanted to pay it off. And as I kind of looked at the research, and okay, so Sabu, and we were working on that earlier, and you have the SEX faction, you have the ECW faction, you have Ravens, Julio and Mickie, or Julio and Alexis were aligned with them, and then different folks. And we did all the run-ins, but the dust settled, and it still came back down to me and Raven. It was a story, and the match wasn't perfect, but the people in the arena, I've said this, I think, multiple times, the loudest kind of single pop was when Jeff Hardy stepped on stage one time, that the people went ballistic. This match here, the anticipation and the build and the whole process that we went through, They were ready to see the match from the time they went to the ring. They were into everything. And when we got down to the finish and the false finishes and the run in and run ins, it was compelling TV that was kind of a microcosm of the Asylum days. I mean, wild, crazy, blood, guts, chairs, gimmicks, a little bit of everything, and certainly story. But Raven, I think to this day, doesn't get enough credit for his ability to tell a story in a Raven style. There is a Raven style of telling a story. I think everybody, whatever artist you may be, that's where you want to kind of get to, in my opinion. Hey, that's a Willie Nelson song. Hey, that's a Taylor Swift song. Hey, that's a Raven could tell a story in his own unique way, but that included just what we're talking about, surprises and run-ins and stuff like that. But it was good. It was certainly a smashing success in every metric. The buy rate was up. We turned away over 1,000. I mean, we turned away, I know, well over 1,000. I heard multiple. It could have been more than that. It was just successful all the way around.
So there's a couple near falls after Raven hits a DDT twice, and then you hit a stroke for a near fall. And then now we get some shenanigans. You're going to do an elbow drop off the middle rope onto a table, onto the floor with Raven on it. And then there's a heated brawl that Wade would say gets a little silly and overdone. Eventually, the ref takes a big bump, and you guys are giving each other simultaneous low blows. And this ECW crew is just going to destroy you with canes and garbage cans. Saturn even gives you a Death Valley driver. They handcuff your arms behind your back like Mick Foley during that famous I Quit match. But instead of 10 chair shots, we get a stereo combination of a Van Daminator by Saturn Incredible, then a concerto, and then it gets, well, a little dicey. Bill Behrens brings out a key to the handcuffs. This is supposed to be a universal key, and they can't get it to work. Even the referee, Rudy Charles, can't get it to work. Raven takes a stab at it, can't get it to work. At this point, it becomes like time standing still, and it has to be a little embarrassing. Finally, Raven uncuffs you, DDTs you, and you still kick out. And the Torch would say this came off even just a little too silly. He goes for a second DDT, but you give him a stroke for the pin, and it ends when Dusty congratulates you. And there's even maybe a tease for an eventual Jeff and Dusty match. But my goodness, did time stand still with this key? Is there a lesson to be learned? We've seen this before, like years ago on pay-per-view. Even Roman and Paul Heyman, they were struggling. And I think last year, AEW in the Shark Cage, these guys were struggling. These damn keys, man. What are we doing?
Let's get some folks on the hotline, because first I want to watch it back. I cannot imagine us not rehearsing this. I think the timing, I got to watch it back. That's all I'll say, Conrad. That it was awkward, me being from behind, but here's my point. The key that Behrens brought is the key that unlocked me.
But it took forever.
Okay. Was that a work or a shoot?
Well, listen, apparently there was a lot of backstage commotion before the show.
Okay.
The Torch says this: the match was largely put together by Jeff Jarrett, as was most of the show. Just before press time, we got word that a lot of the creative ideas, the biggest of which was the backstage booking issue in the promotion, have all been worked out. We'll have more details next week, but the basic gist is that Jarrett was described to me as being on a totally different level as a politician than Russo or Raven. Well, that's obvious, just, with a calendar that says 2023 on it. According to several different sources, Jarrett laid out 13 run-ins. The spot, which was actually botched, where Ron and Don Harris and Mike Sanders came out, was originally going to have them attacking Jarrett, putting a beating on him until Brian Lee and Slash and Mike Awesome would make the save. As it turned out, the Church guys ended up on camera first, and it had to be explained that they weren't helping Jarrett but as a strike against SEX. It was argued there were too many run-ins as it was, and I believe it was Raven who convinced Jarrett to have them fight each other and not interfere in the match itself, since Jarrett couldn't agree to cancel the run-in. And the other piece of the backstage commotion is about Raven's contract, because it expired with this show, and apparently that day he did not want to sign a new one, even when you guys offered him a shorter time frame. Meltzer would say it's believed he's getting $1,000 per show and was asking for a raise to $1,500, which would be what Dusty Rhodes earns. It appears that everything is either worked out or everyone is now on the same page, because it was a huge issue at the show and now it's considered a settled issue. The highest paid wrestler is Jarrett at $3,000, although his duties are far deeper than just the company's headline wrestler. Rhodes is believed to be the second highest. When Waltman and Hall were in, they were making $2,000 each, although Hall made $7,500 at first when they were both using Health South money. Brian James was also making $2,000 at first, but agreed to a cut to $1,000 before he quit the promotion after he had agreed to the big cut. Whether intentionally or coincidental, Raven's deal ran out the day of the show. He did prove with the right build-up that he's a drawing card, because judging from the live crowd and the pay-per-view response, their revenue coming in on this show was probably way up, maybe as much as $80,000 more than a usual week. Raven not signing a new deal had little or nothing to do with the Jarrett match, as Jarrett was going over by pinfall all along. Him not signing guaranteed that decision wouldn't be changed, but was virtually impossible either way. So let's talk about the raise. Do you think that number's right, that this was an $80,000 boost to a normal week? Because that's a big bump.
I mean, Dave got that from somewhere, and I'm assuming extrapolated it out. We didn't, and this was over time and ebbed and flowed, kind of live and die weekly. We turned it into more of a monthly, but we all knew by just gross ticket sales, okay, this is way, way up. I mean, it was a bump across the board, but I looked at it much more from a momentum perspective, that this was one of the first ones, maybe the first one that we said, okay, if we can create one a month, maybe two, but really one a month kind of tentpole events, that will get us traction. That will get us momentum. I do remember, and a lot of folks, you know, I'll say, oh gosh, through the years, oh, Raven should have been champion. Raven should have been champion. Raven should have been champion. We were kind of all, and I say we collectively, Raven included, myself included, Panda, everybody a part of it. We were a victim of our circumstances, because Raven understood why he wasn't champion. We didn't have him under paper. He also wasn't going to sign a deal that he was uncomfortable with. He wanted a raise. Well, how are we going to justify a raise with Raven without giving us some metrics to prove to that? It was I'll say a typical business situation, but we built something, it drew money, and then we moved on from here. But it was definitely a boost in revenue, and we all knew it.
Well, it draws your largest and hottest crowd ever for the show, according to the Observer. About 1,400. You turned away 1,100 more. Meltzer would say no word on paid, although it was believed to have been more than 700, which is crazy to think. You know, you could have sold this out and still had a waiting list, but because of the model being what it was, you'd already given some freebies. And it's even written here, there were people internally that were not thrilled with the show, believing this was the show that should have been a home run, but some of the matches were sloppy and some of the matches looked better on paper than they turned out to be. When it's all said and done, do you remember being a little disappointed, or was it just high fives all around?
No, I could look at the critic in me. I wasn't completely happy with the Raven match that we had. I remember, it's funny that I had just had a little flashback while you were saying is that we wanted stories, but like everybody who ran in doesn't need to touch me and Raven. So our match, I'm sure I heavily critiqued it that night and the next day, but other parts of it, look, we knew we were putting we wanted to put our best foot forward under these circumstances, and it doesn't always pan out that way. It's also another set of circumstances, and this is kind of a Jerry Jarrett mentality. When you know you have that single main event that's going to draw all the money, the rest of the card, can be true building blocks that you don't have to have any other kind of blow off. Build for the next ones. But when you do that, a lot of times you run the risk of not having your best foot forward content wise. So it's one of those deals. And in these Wednesday night shows, oh my gosh, I've said it so many times. I used to love it, but me, Mike Tanay, and Don West would go out to their hotel and go down and eat dinner and have a couple of cocktails, talking about and dissecting the show on what we could have done better, what did go good. I used to pick Mike's brain and like what felt good to you, what didn't feel good to you. And on these nights, I would kind of dive into, well, why wasn't this? Just those kind of conversations helped me grow immensely as a executive producer, kind of having a feel for every Wednesday producing a 2-hour show, a live show, what hits and what misses.
When the month ends here, the month of April comes to a close, you're now staring at your 1-year anniversary in about 6 weeks. And you've just drawn your biggest gate since the beginning, your biggest story you've put together. I mean, listen, we've talked about how you're a delusional optimist. How are you feeling at this point in your TNA journey, coming out of the ring with Raven?
For sure, optimistic. And I think that went with getting more of a comfort level of, look, at the end of the day, I think the first TV that I actually wrote by myself was in WCCW when we went out to Dallas, Texas. And then I helped on early Memphis, but as far as having the weight of the world on my shoulders completely, that was June 19, 2002. So we're 9 months in. My comfort level of being we'll call it the executive producer, began to get more and more comfortable. Panda's comfort level of understanding their investment, that it's not going to happen overnight, but we're willing to invest. But what kind of revenue are we going to make against that? So it's not, we weren't losing 100 a week. We're is it 10 this week and 20? I mean, so it was doable. So we're coming into year one and knowing, I believe Matthew Odie secured 1 or 2 small international deals. We're kind of looking at our core roster of AJ and others and knowing we're putting the building blocks together. So at this time, Conrad, I don't think my delusional optimism was there. I think I had real optimism that we're going to get traction with this. We've just got to keep on keeping on.
Well, we're going to keep on keeping on next week because we're going to be talking about Tennessee Lee in the spring of 1998 and the WWF. We're going full-blown Attitude Era. Shawn Michaels has just dropped the WWF title to Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania. You're helping Jennifer Flowers at the biggest show of the year. You're going to be wrestling Brockus on a European tour, singing with Sawyer Brown on a pay-per-view. Working with the WWF training camp. Steve Blackman's here, the King of the Ring. Man, it's a fun time to talk about the WWF in 1998, and that's what we'll be doing next week here on the program. Of course, you get all of our shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com, including a nice piece of bonus content. We just did a little watch-along of you winning the world title for the first time at Spring Stampede 2000, and we're not done yet. We recently sat down with our man David Sahadi and did a bit of a conversation about his time working with Vince and then working in TNA. But the good, the bad, and the ugly of working in the wrestling business. You've probably seen all of his packages and heard that name forever, but when was the last time you actually saw an interview with David Sahadi? This might be one of the first ones. It's over at adfreeshows.com. Want to give a shout out too, if you're a business owner looking to target men that are 25 to 54 years old, I can't think of a better place to advertise than right here on My World. As a matter of fact, you hear some of the same ads over and over and over. What's that about? Well, it really works. With our super targeted audience, there's very little waste. Go right now to advertisewithjarrett.com and find out how easy it is to advertise here on My World. Hope you check the show out on YouTube as well. It's free. Hit that subscribe button, throw us a like, throw a comment in there. Start featuring some of your comments from YouTube here on the show soon. That's MyWorld on YouTube.com. And of course, all the merch and everything that's fit to print over at boxofgimmicks.com. You've seen all the Last Outlaw swag that we've been promoting throughout the show. You can follow us on social as well. He is at Real Jeff Jarrett everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I am at My World Pod, of course, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Man, this was fun. I don't know what I expected. I love talking about the good old days of Impact and TNA wrestling. I was such a fan in those Asylum years, and I just love the idea that it's you, man. You're out here bootstrapping. It's your money. It's your promotion. It's your creative thinking. It's you as the top star because, well, frankly, you're not going anywhere. And whew, it's hard to imagine it was 20 years ago. It feels like 10 years ago to me, Jeff.
You know what I'm sitting here thinking about? Meltzer came up with the number, an $80,000 increase. And, extrapolate that out times 4.
Right.
That's cash positive in Dave's world. Yeah, I mean, in TNA land during this era. So anyway, fun to relive this, fun to go down this. Yeah, Jeff Raven was a early highlight. That the real diehards, there was a group of heel fans as you walk down the ramp. They were right there, and they used to say, "This is the heel section," and they'd boo the hell out of me. And they were kind of big Raven fans. Anyway, trip down memory lane. Lots of moving parts. We unpacked a lot, pal. I enjoyed it. I really did.
Hey, by the way, if you can't get enough of the old school way of wrestling, let me do a little cheap plug. What Happened When is going to be watching some old Memphis wrestling this week, Jeff. So tomorrow, yes, we are. We're watching March 1st, 1986. Does that ring a bell?
It's when I got beat up.
Yeah, it is. March 1st, 1986 is what Tony and I are going to watch this week on What Happened When. We're going to have some fun looking at old school Jeff Jarrett. This might be like your first on-screen dalliance, right? Like first time you're really doing stuff.
Yep. I can't wait to hear Shivani. You got to get a soundbite of him calling my punches against Buddy Landale. Just did a windmill. Buddy's like, "Now, Jeff." Anyway, I can't inventory him. But
I'll tell you what, you're not going to need a windmill tomorrow because old Dax Hardwood's going home with what I like to call a little keepsake, a little memento, a guitar necklace, if you will, a guitar necktie. Maybe he'll be able to tell us how many lights are in the ceiling there in Sunrise. You think we can get an accurate count?
There we go. I like it.
Seriously, what would you, if we were a betting man, we've talked about betting here before. You're what, minus 400 going into this?
For sure. Whatever you call, pal, whatever you call. I'm tough in the state of Florida. I'll just say that.
Yeah. And no hanging chads, right? We don't need them. We'll be back next week talking about the WWF in 1998 right here on My World.
Peace.
Hey, this is Catch Wheeler with FTR, aka one half of the greatest tag team of all time, saying go right now, savewithconrad.com, and I promise you, you won't regret it.
If I could say take advantage of one thing with First Family Mortgage, it is the knowledge that they have, because they have knowledge far beyond just the loan process, and they can help you out with all of that.
That's how confident I am with working with these people. Like, I'm going to keep buying and I'm going to keep going back.
SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Woo!